Hey guys, here's another part of the story about the boy who comes down from the mountains to find the 7 waifus. The timestamp for part 3 is in the description, so let's get into the video. Our hero was raised in the mountains and was now heading to the city. This was because he found out he had 7 older sisters waiting for him. And since the boy was in the prime of his youth, he got very excited. His eyes sparkled at the thought of this idea. In his imagination, he pictured all his sisters as beautiful. This happened because he was an orphan and was raised by masters in a sect in the mountains. And when he found out about his other sisters from the sect, he immediately fell in love with the idea. That's why he rushed to the city in search of them. You'll see how awesome this protagonist is. And to get to the moment where he meets his waifus, we need to learn more about his journey. The story begins with the old masters sending him away. Rico, which is the name of our hero, didn't want to leave the mountain because he was worried about the masters. However, they all hid to pretend they no longer cared for him. And our hero knew the masters were doing this. We see those who had taken in little Rico, and they comment that the boy was very well trained. Now he would have to embark on this new journey and live on his own. Fred knew his masters were hiding because they didn't want to say goodbye to him, and the sect members even slammed the door, putting on a show so Fred wouldn't suffer from leaving them. He gives an awkward laugh, saying he knows their plan. Then our hero kneels and thanks them for all these years, as he was an orphan and was taken in by the sect. Later he arrives at the city station, having never left that mountain before. He couldn't imagine what the people in the big city would be like. At that moment he notices a very beautiful girl, and I can't stop staring at her. You already know very well where he's looking, and this ends up making the girl uncomfortable, asking if he's never seen large melons before. He says her meridians are blocked due to excessive weight, and this will cause complications. The girl wonders how he knew she had problems. We already see here that our hero's training was impressive, and Rico wasn't just any man. And so he continues his journey. Since the trip was a bit long, he ended up staying in a room on the train. He remembers that his master had given him some tips on how to meet his martial sisters. When he arrived in the city, he would meet the 7th sister. Upon receiving an amulet, he should show it to the girl, and before leaving, the master warns him about the adult book they found under his bed. Of course, he wouldn't want anyone to see that and makes an excuse, saying it was classic literature. However, his master says the martial sisters are much more beautiful than the girls in that book. And of course, Rico isn't foolish and starts imagining things. It was thanks to his fertile imagination that he became super motivated to find them. For a moment he thought it was all a lie, but now he was starting to believe. It would be amazing to have martial sisters, and he even comments about the money he received. All that money was to be spent until we found the 7th oldest sister. Very curious, he opens the envelope to check how much was inside. There was about 500, and he gets excited, saying he only spent 20 per month in the mountains. At that moment, he hears a voice from the other side of the door, and a very beautiful girl appears, saying they will be travel companions. The smelly Rico immediately falls in love, thinking all the women in the city are this beautiful. If he came to my city, he'd be disappointed, and return to the mountains in less than 30 minutes. Don't ask where I live because you'll regret it. He even starts imagining in his head that this could be a romantic encounter. But to ruin everything, the girl's grandfather was with her, and he makes this sour onion face. The old man greets the boy, and he immediately notices that the elder is having trouble breathing. Rico makes a comment about the old man's heart problems. That sounded a bit rude, and Rosina starts getting angry with our hero. However, the old man knew this boy was different, so our hero covers it up, saying he was just imagining things. A few minutes pass and the girl says she's going to lie down on the top bunk, and since Fred isn't foolish, he immediately starts observing the scene, but at that moment, the old man feels a sharp pain in his chest. He starts coughing as if it's something very serious. The one with pink hair comes down the stairs and asks if her grandfather wants some water. After laying him down on the bed, she says she'll go get help. Desperate, the girl calls a staff member and asks her to fetch a doctor. That girl was from the Yu family, a very important family. That's why the staff member runs off to get help, as the old man was very rich. Even in these stories, the life of a rich man is worth more than us mere mortals. The girl runs to her grandfather, trying to comfort him, very worried. Our hero, having ancient training, knew what needed to be done. However, he was warned by his masters not to get too involved with the women in the city. The old man continues coughing heavily. However, Rico also learned that he should help people. Catching her attention, he said he could help her. But at that moment, an arrogant doctor enters the room. Rosina becomes very hopeful, expecting treatment for her grandfather. This useless doctor asks about the patient's condition. Since the girl isn't a doctor or anything, she says she doesn't know much, but her grandfather fainted. In reality, this guy should be checking the patient's condition, not asking others what's wrong with the old man. After looking around, the doctor says he can't make a diagnosis just with words. The girl gets worried and starts asking what needs to be done to save her grandfather's life. The girl asks how she's supposed to get a test when he just got sick less than 3 minutes ago. But this slimy doctor keeps saying nothing can be done without a detailed analysis. He even says that he's the director of the district hospital to show that he has credibility. At that moment, the old man starts coughing even more, and his face turns purple. Fred knows the old man's symptoms are worsening and that he won't last long, and the girl insists that the doctor save her grandfather. So this jerk of a doctor leaves, saying he can't do anything. When he steps outside, the staff member explains who the old man is. She says that's Mr. Yu. This leaves the 4-eyed doctor completely shocked. He asks if the woman is sure, and she says yes, and that they are very rich. So the shameless guy goes back inside the room, saying he'll make a good impression. What he really wanted was to pretend he'd save the old man and says he'll perform first aid. He climbs under the bed and starts doing chest compressions. Since our hero is skilled in Chinese medicine, he knew that would make things worse. So he asked the doctor not to do that, otherwise the old man would lose his life. The blockhead asks who this boy is to challenge his methods. He even asks which hospital the boy works at, trying to humiliate him. Very humbly, Fred says he's just a student of Chinese medicine. But since this is somewhat taboo in China, and people don't take it seriously, the doctor starts mocking him. Trying to belittle the boy, he says that he has over 10 years of experience as a doctor. However, Fred says if he continues with those chest compressions, the old man will die. At that moment, the doctor realizes the boy is right, but he can't just stand there doing nothing, as he wants to make a good impression on the Yu family. So he goes to the pink-haired girl and tells her not to worry, as he'll save her grandfather. What he really wanted was to pretend he was doing something so that, in the end, the Yu family would owe him. When he mentions saving Mr. Yu, the girl wonders how the doctor knew her surname. And since she isn't foolish, she starts connecting the dots and imagines the staff member told the doctor. That boy didn't know who they were, and yet he still wanted to help. She also remembers that about 15 minutes ago, he had said her grandfather had heart problems. That's why she goes to the doctor and tells him to wait. Then she turns to our protagonist to ask for his help. The girl asks if what he said earlier about her grandfather's illness was true. Rico is startled and says he could help with traditional Chinese medicine. And now he's the one mocking the doctor, saying traditional methods are better than modern medicine. And for those who watch Karate Kid, you know very well that Chinese medicine is powerful. With tears in her eyes, she asks if the boy could save her grandfather. He tells her not to worry, as it's just a heart function issue, and he can save him. Full of hope, she asks if he can do it. However, the doctor doesn't want to lose credit and starts saying Chinese medicine is dangerous. She calls out this shameless guy, saying he's being arrogant, but after the staff member explained who they were, the doctor came running back with his tail between his legs. The girl turns back to our hero, and since she's very beautiful, there's no way our protagonist could refuse her request to save the old man. If a girl like this asked you for something, I'm sure you'd do anything. The boy wanted to help and was just waiting for her to ask. He found out she was someone important and probably very rich, but he wasn't interested in that. The only thing he wanted was to help a beautiful girl. Cracking his knuckles, he says he'll do his best. So that worm keeps annoying everyone, saying Chinese medicine doesn't work. But neither Rico nor the pink-haired girl paid him any attention. That way, he takes out the needles he used in the mountains from his backpack. He explains that these needles will help, and that he practiced on some wild boars. Of course, this seemed a bit scary, and the doctor starts losing faith. What he really wanted was for the boy to fail so he could step in and help. After tearing the old man's shirt, he prepares to place the needles. After finding the pressure points, he starts placing them in the correct spots. And within moments, he places all the needles and finally finishes with the last one. This generates a very bright light, and soon after, the old man wakes up coughing. That cough causes some red liquid to come out. Everyone is shocked because it worked and the old man regained consciousness. However, the doctor thinks it went wrong because a lot of red liquid came out, but that was necessary. And our hero turns around, giving a wink as a taunt. The doctor realizes that this boy is actually impressive and is shocked. When he looks at the old man, he's even more surprised. The old man had really woken up and was conscious. The boy explains that the old man had vomited a clot and is now fine. The old man thanks Rico, calling him Little Master. Then he asks who these people are. The woman introduces herself as the ticket collector who called the doctor, and this onion-faced guy says he's the one who helped the old man recover. The old man is surprised, asking if it was really this doctor who cured him. But since he isn't foolish either, he asks why it was that boy who placed the needles. This puts the doctor in a tough spot, and he starts stuttering, trying to come up with an excuse. The doctor even says the old man needs to be hospitalized, and he asks the boy if that's true. This makes the shameless guy angry because the old man was trusting the boy without information more than him, a hospital director. Rico says the old man doesn't need to be hospitalized, and he ends up telling the doctor that he appreciates the invitation but won't go to the hospital. The ticket collector tells the four-eyed guy to leave, and he gets all worked up, throwing a tantrum since this was the opportunity of a lifetime to become a millionaire. Fred tells the old man he'll place one more needle to finish the treatment, and the old man says it's okay. However, our hero is so fast that the old man didn't even feel it, and the old man asks if it's already done. This leaves the old man very impressed, and he even starts wondering where this boy came from. He turns to his granddaughter and asks her to give the boy a card and invite him to dinner. In a cute way, she thanks her little brother by handing him a card. He even thinks she might be one of his martial sisters, but if she were, he would have recognized her. So Fred thanks them for the dinner invitation, as food's never too much. The girl starts laughing because his accent is a bit different since he lived in the mountains. To ruin the moment of relaxation, that doctor arrives, saying he's going to call the police. He says it's a crime to practice medicine without a license. Confidently, our hero says the police will arrest the doctor because he's a criminal, and they start insulting each other, and the doctor calls the police. Coincidentally, at that moment, the train starts braking. The loudspeaker tells passengers not to worry, as it's a temporary stop. A police officer appears saying it's a routine inspection. That shameless doctor says this punk was practicing medicine without a license. When looking at this doctor, one of the officers recognizes him. The authority says justice is being served for non-bailable crimes, and they immediately handcuff him. They were doing this because the hospital he had directed was selling illegal drugs, and that way he's taken away, and our protagonist says he was lucky to guess the doctor was a criminal. The pink-haired girl asks how Rico did that, figuring out the doctor would be arrested. He says you just guessed. Of course, the boy wouldn't say he was trained by masters with special abilities, and that's why he could sense people's energy. So the girl becomes very interested in getting to know our hero better, and asks if he could give her some future advice. The old man realizes the boy is mysterious, but polite and humble. Fred's heart starts beating faster because the girl is beautiful and smells nice. He even thanks the masters, saying the girls in the city are much better than the ones in the books. Fred tells her to stay away from people dressed in green. But the girl isn't satisfied with that, and keeps asking him for more advice. If I were him, I'd already advise her to give me a kiss. But the boy just says he can't give any more tips. and only now do we discover Rosina's name. She's called Alice, and the old man tells her not to bother the young master. The old man asks if he needs to take medicine, and our hero says he'll write him a prescription. This leaves the old man even more shocked, as our protagonist had an answer for everything. So he starts rummaging through his backpack to get something. He pulls out a feather pen, and this leaves Alice shocked because someone still uses brushes in the 21st century. The brushes weren't enough, and he also pulls out 2 ancient Egyptian papyri to write the medicine prescription. After writing, he says he keeps the tradition of using a brush, because that's how he learned. And he even says if everyone used pens or pencils, traditions would be lost. Seeing that he's a unique boy, her little heart starts beating faster. Soon after, he hands the prescription to the old man, telling him to take the medicine for 3 months. And he even says this illness is hereditary, leaving the old man even more surprised. To avoid explaining that he had martial training, he says he just deduced it based on the type of illness. Imagine him having to explain that at the top of the mountain there's a martial arts sect with superpowers. Of course, he didn't want to go through all that trouble. The old man asks if there's really someone with such knowledge. All these years he's had chest pains like his father and a grandfather, and that's why he strongly believes in this young master's words. So he thanks him, saying his family will be in debt to him. But Fred tells the old man not to worry and wishes him a speedy recovery. Soon after, he asks the girl to retrieve the card she had given to Fred. That way, with flushed cheeks, she asks him to return the card. This leaves our protagonist a bit confused, but without complaining, he ends up returning it. She goes to her grandfather and hands him the card. Then the old man says that card had his contact, but the boy should have his granddaughter's contact. You already know what's happening, right? The old man is playing Cupid. The girl takes her phone out of her pocket to add him on WhatsApp. She asks him to scan her QR code, but since he's from the mountains, he doesn't know what WhatsApp is, much less this so-called code. She tries to explain with all the patience in the world. Then he pulls out a flip phone from his pocket. For sure, 90% of you didn't even know phones like this existed, and the girl is confused. He says that even though his phone is old, he can still use the internet and access news. She isn't sure if WhatsApp works on that thing and feels a bit awkward. Then he remembers when he received this phone as a gift from his master, and it was a really fun day. Until then, he could only use calculators, and when he tells these stories, the two of them don't understand anything. The old man tells Alice not to confuse the boy, and just exchange phone numbers. That way they save each other's contacts. She feels a little embarrassed and says she now has his number saved on her phone, and the girl even says she'll invite him to dinner when they arrive in the city. She wants him to try the fried chicken from her favorite restaurant. With his eyes shining, Fred says he really wants to try it too. The old man is already excited, seeing his granddaughter flirting with a boy with superpowers. He even mentions that the Wang family has their eyes on his daughter for marriage to strengthen the clans, but the old man doesn't really want his granddaughter to marry into that family. When he looks at the old man, Fred notices he's worried. The boy asks the old man what's troubling him so much, but the old man says it's just a silly matter and that it was great to meet the young man today. Frederico is very good with words and says the old man looks healthy and radiant, and this already makes the old man very happy. Soon after, he thanks the little young master, and before leaving he warns Alice to be careful with people wearing green clothes, as a disaster could happen. She isn't really believing it, and asks if he's sure about this prediction. Moments later, they arrive in the city and stop right at the station. He asks if she's carrying cement in that suitcase, but the girl says it's just some basic things, typical of a woman. People are shocked that he can carry such a big suitcase and start commenting. Alice says her friend will be arriving to pick them up, and her name is Ayara. At that moment, the girl arrives, drifting with her car. From inside comes a beautiful redhead, but with a green dress. This was Ayara, Alice's best friend. And when she notices that the woman was wearing a green dress, she becomes a bit discouraged. She asks Federico if there was any way to resolve this. He asks if, as Alice's friend, she would be willing to change out of the dress, and this leaves them embarrassed. Alice even asks if it was really necessary to make her take off that dress, and our hero said yes, to avoid a catastrophe. So Alice asks if it was just a matter of putting on another outfit, and he says yes. This makes Ayara a bit jealous, and she even wonders why her friend is so close to a boy. Then you come running, saying you have something important to tell Ayara. What the redhead wanted to say was for Alice doesn't not to trust men, but Alice speaks first, saying that Ayara needs to change her clothes. This leaves her a bit embarrassed, not understanding the reason. Alice mentions that she knows her friend has several nice outfits in the car, and just needs to change. It was true, but it was very strange for someone to say that. Since she trusted her friend very much, she said it was okay to change, and Alice starts celebrating because everything would be resolved smoothly. And so they get in the car. The redhead asks Alice about her relationship with that boy. She says they just met. But Ayara doesn't believe it much because they seem very close. When they look outside to gossip about the boy, he's no longer there. The redhead even wonders what happened to him. Alice mentions that they met on the train and her grandfather spoke highly of him. Then Yara tells her friend not to trust men because they seem nice but are all bad. Alice is already missing him and starts wondering why he left without saying goodbye. In fact, Federico didn't want to bother them, and it was inappropriate to see a girl change clothes. So he immediately turns on the GPS, looking for the apartment his master had rented. A taxi driver appears, asking if he is new to the city and if he needs a service. Fred says his destination is only 14 kilometers away. He even tells the boy to get in the car because 14 kilometers is too far. But Fred says he doesn't need a taxi to go to a place so close. The taxi driver asks if he's going to run there, and that's exactly what our protagonist was going to do. He says that in the mountains he would run 20 kilometers and not even sweat, and as he stretches he starts running like crazy. The crazy one was very tough and leaves the dust behind, and the taxi driver wonders if the boy is a mutant. In this way, he runs through the whole city, causing strong winds. It looked like the Flash from Dandadan. And so, he arrives in the residential area. Even though he had never been around the city, he knew how to get around very well, and quickly finds the apartment. That was the Redwood residence, and an elderly couple confirms the name of the place. The old man still says these apartments are very old, but the boy doesn't care, he just wants to meet his martial sisters. And the elderly couple keeps saying that young people these days are leaving home too early to work, and they mention that this neighborhood is far from the industries. But our protagonist didn't come to work at all. He came to try to get a girl. He remembers what his master said when he mentioned that the rent included Wi-Fi, and he gets excited because the internet in the mountains was very slow. His master had said the Wi-Fi internet was 2 megabytes, and that was a lot. Little does he know how 5 megabyte internet is here in my city, and it's top notch. I doubt you have faster internet than mine. Here, it doesn't even take 12 hours to upload a video to YouTube. If you want to know the name of my internet provider to get one just like it, ask in the comments and I'll respond. And so he goes up all happy, imagining he'll be in paradise. After confirming the room number, he prepares to knock. At that moment, a very beautiful woman named Diana emerges. This woman is incredibly gorgeous, and our protagonist can't stop admiring the scenery. With flushed cheeks, he asks if this is the house he rented, and introduces himself. She confirms it is and says she is the landlady, Diana. The seductive woman invites him in. She explains he can use the clothesline on Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday. Blushing, he stares at those clothes, feeling embarrassed. He has never seen such diversity, and she asks why he's drooling. Awkwardly, Fred says it's nothing. As he opens the bedroom door to store his backpack, he smells lavender, a scent so pleasant he could enjoy it forever. The scent comes from Diana's clothes. He feels lucky, and he hasn't even met the Marshall sisters yet. She mentions this is her room. He rushes to the other side of the apartment, trying to act casual. After entering, he locks the door. Diana's excited. She mentions she likes rustic, introverted men and finds him handsome. But then he opens the door and she's curious. He actually wanted the Wi-Fi password. She spells it out, blushing because she finds him cute. A spark ignites between them. After a few seconds of staring, he becomes even more embarrassed. He returns to his room and locks the door. Diana says it will be great sharing the apartment with him. She hadn't imagined her guest would be so handsome. At night, he lies down to rest after a long day. On the first day alone, he met 3 goddesses more interesting than those in books. Taking the amulet from his pocket, he wonders what the 7th sister will be like. He extends his hand, trying to use his future seeing power. After charging some energy, he concentrates. Despite his efforts, he can't envision the sister's appearance. All he knows is that she is a wealthy businesswoman. Just imagining her body excites him, but his master's blocked his energy to prevent him from knowing their looks. He tries hard, but fails. Discovering she's a businesswoman, he searches online. Unfortunately, most businesswomen are much older. He gives up searching for the 7th sister. His stomach growls with hunger. He decides to grab a bite in the kitchen. He checks if Diana's around, feeling shy. In the kitchen, he encounters an electric stove he has never seen before. Watching some online videos, he learns how to turn it on. The flame appears like magic. He celebrates as if it were a magic trick. He boils water, cooks pasta, and adds some seasoning. Quickly, his meal is ready. His eyes gleam with hunger. After tasting it, he declares himself a great cook. As he eats, he notices the unusual silence. In the mountains, things were never this quiet. He was always surrounded by his masters and now misses that. He hears a noise at the door. It's the voices of 2 women. There stands Diana with a friend, who seems more like a wildcat. Diana's friend asks who that boy is and looks scared. He tries to explain, but the woman runs away, leaving Diana on the floor. Rico is confused as he didn't say anything and the girl fled. Seeing Diana on the floor, he wonders what happened. Using his spiritual vision, he senses something wrong. He tries to sit her up, but she's unconscious. There's an energy block in her neck, and he realizes someone has poisoned her. This seemed like something quite dangerous, and he becomes worried. Diana is gasping for breath, her heart pounding. She has a very high fever, her body shaking. After pressing some energy points on her back, she vomits. Some pills fall out. He realizes it wasn't poisoning, but an illegal drug. It was a very high dose, and the other pills had likely already been digested. With tears in her eyes, Diana, in pain, asks him to call a doctor. He says a doctor won't be able to save her, as the substance is already in her blood. She has at most 10 minutes to live. The girl is already accepting her end, but the pain is intense, and she can't hold back her screams. This happened a few hours ago when a mobster came to her bar. She didn't want to drink that wine, but he forced her. This girl had suffered a lot since birth, abandoned by her mother. Her mother was a gold digger who chased after men. Just by looking at the woman's face, our protagonist knows she's had a tough life. He decides to help her, as it's his duty to save lives. He feels her pulse and tells her not to worry, as he can help. Diana doesn't fully believe him, but has no other choice. The boy says her pulse is still clear so he can eliminate the toxin. To perform the procedure, he starts to remove her blouse. At that moment, Diana thinks all men are the same. But our protagonist means no harm. He just needs to see the energy points to place the needles. Since the toxin's advanced, needles alone won't suffice, so he grabs a scalpel. He tells her to hold on, as he'll perform a small surgery. After a few seconds, he managed to eliminate the toxin and close the incision with stitches. He tells her she needs to rest it to regain her strength. With the toxin removed, she stops feeling pain. Like a true gentleman, he carries her in his arms, saying he performed a small surgery on her. The girl is smitten, thinking he is truly a man of dignity and respect. He carries her to the sofa to lie down. As he lays her down, he tells her to stay calm while he fixes some things. Her cheeks flush with relief, feeling safe now. Suddenly, someone starts banging on the door angrily. It's the voice of that friend, saying, "There's a man with Diana in the apartment." Diana says these people are the ones who poisoned her. Rico asks if she wants him to open the door. It seems her friend has brought a man with her. Diana tells him not to open it, as they are bad people. She's scared because they are very dangerous criminals. The girl had managed to open a bar near her apartment. A few hours earlier, she was there preparing to open her business, but her friend arrived with some thuggish mobsters. The man threw several bills onto the counter. Diana was already worried as these guys had a terrible reputation. He ordered the strongest drinks she had, and what they wanted from Diana I can't tell you. But they were demanding something very invasive that would ruin her reputation. Her friend, who got her into this mess, whispers in her ear. She says if Diana agrees to go out with the mobster and do whatever he wants, she'll make a lot of money. But Diana's an upright woman and won't sell her body. This makes her friend angry, calling Diana a goody two-shoes. They start fighting, and the mobster watches it all. He has some pills, saying he'll put them in her drink to make Diana want him. He drops them into the glass and offers it to her, telling her to drink. Diana isn't foolish and knows something is in the drink, but she's afraid to refuse. Everyone starts pressuring her, saying if she doesn't drink, they'll destroy the bar. What she wants at this moment is to beat up her friend. Pushed to the extreme, she ends up taking the glass and drinking. Just a few minutes later, she starts feeling unwell. This is the story she tells our protagonist, who, when he notices, is devouring a watermelon. Hungry, he asks if she wants him to call the police. She says the police won't solve anything. The mobsters are too influential. The girl is still weak, her legs numb. At that moment, he appears to support her. He's the last romantic on Earth and says that he's by her side to help her with whatever she needs. Just then, the shameless ones manage to open the door and to become nervous. Poor Diana asks how they dared to come to her house. Her friend says she thought there was a criminal and called for help. He asks who this girl thinks she is to call him a criminal. She says she was just worried about her best friend. She even pretends to be innocent, calling Diana to come with her, saying this blue-haired boy isn't trustworthy. Without hesitation, Diana hugs our hero and says he is her boyfriend and that she told him what happened at the bar. Her friend says nothing happened and that they didn't poison her. The shameless mobster can't understand how Diana's still alive. Diana insists it was them who poisoned her. Our hero asks if she's sure, which she confirms. In response, Fred says he believes her and will deal with these bullies. He confronts the mobster, claiming to be Diana's boyfriend. Actually, he just wants to show confidence, and Diana wonders how this boy has such strength. He grabs the mobster's hand, who says our hero is a lucky guy. He says he'll find out who poisoned his girlfriend and make them pay. The mobster wonders what the hell this kid is talking about. Then he turns to that friend, thanking her for all the help they gave his girlfriend. The girl and the mobster start to realize this guy is faking it. But then they begin to think he's actually a weakling and scared. Fred delivers a checkmate, saying he'll go to the bar to see the camera footage. Once he finds out who poisoned his girlfriend, he'll make them pay. This makes the shameless ones nervous, as they had forgotten about the cameras. The nervous guy turns, saying he forgot he had something important to do. Actually, he's scared of our hero calling him out. The guy turns, very nervous, telling Fred to spill it. The boy tells the mobster that real men shouldn't think only with what's below the belt. After all, they might end up in trouble. This makes the mobster angry, telling our hero to shut up. Then he leaves, very angry, planning to pay for the footage at the bar. He threatens the protagonist in his mind, saying he'll be the one to pay. He asks Diana if he should go save those recordings, but Diana says it's no use, as these mobsters have too much influence with the police. In a very calm manner, he tells Diana they should enjoy dinner. The girl says it will be great to eat someone else's cooking. A stronger bond starts to form between them as she feels safe. That shameless one really managed to access and destroy the footage. He even says there's no chance he'll be incriminated. The grumpy one tells the mobster to forget about Diana and focus on her. The guy says that's exactly what he'll do. So, the two of them leave to relieve some stress. Minutes later, he is frustrated. Now, another question, what happened and why wasn't it working? Actually, he couldn't perform and says this has never happened to him before. Then the mobster remembers what our hero said about not thinking with what's below the belt. He starts to realize it must be something that kid did. Punching the wall, he says he'll make that brat regret it. Back at Diana's apartment, they are having dinner. She says the smell is delicious. As the moment she tastes it, she feels a delicious flavor. The boy asks if it's good. She says she's never had such delicious pasta. Fred asks if her parents didn't make pasta for her. At that moment, she freezes, saying nothing. This makes him apprehensive. Diana reveals she has no family. Her father passed away long ago, and her mother abandoned her at an orphanage. He was also an orphan and asks more about her mother. She explains her mother was a gold digger, marrying men for inheritance. After her father died, her mother started dating other rich men. Fred realizes that even though his life was tough, hers was worse, but the girl tells him not to pity her, as she worked hard and opened a bar. She's independent, having fought for everything she has. Gradually, Diana becomes drowsy from the surgery. Before falling asleep, she says she's very afraid of the mobsters. He knows he must do something to protect her, as she'll never have peace. He carries her to bed, promising to protect her. Her face begins to glow. He notices this only happens in people with special energies. This golden hue with a white aura symbolizes a healing ability. He lays her down and watches her, confirming she has an exceptional body. His master said these special people were great for cultivation. But his third master warned that these women would be the most complicated. His heart races at the thought of cultivating with her, but he slaps himself, remembering he is an honorable man. He leaves, thinking about finding the seventh sister. Diana wakes up seconds later. She was only pretending to sleep. She realizes Fred is a good man, as he didn't do anything inappropriate. She falls even more in love, seeing him as a man of dignity. She indeed has a special body, already healed. However, her self-esteem is low, and she thinks she's not good enough for him. The next morning, he wakes up to the smell of coffee. Diana says that since he made dinner the night before, she wanted to surprise him. There's a table set with tea, bread, and pastries. She's eager to see him eat and asks if he likes it. Fred, always honest, says the taste is average. Diana smiles, blushing, and admits she bought it from the bakery. He is surprised she's already recovered, confirming her special body. He asks what other surprise she has prepared. She says she noticed he isn't an ordinary man. Without a doubt, he'll make a name for himself in this city and become famous. So before that happens, she wants to be his friend and offers 6 months of free rent. He is thrilled, as half a year of free rent is fantastic. He starts calculating how much money he'll save. She didn't expect him to be so happy. Once again, the shameless mobster appears, ruining the mood. He is at the door causing trouble, and Fred stands up. Diana tells him not to bother and to ignore him, but Fred knows it's because of the handshake he gave the mobster the night before. The woman asks if he poisoned the man, but it was something much worse. He admits he took away the mobster's abilities. The girl falls even more in love, realizing he did it to protect her. The shameless mobster appears, asking what Fred did to him. Our hero feigns ignorance, saying he did nothing. The mobster grabs him by the collar and starts threatening him. Fred slaps his hand away and asks if the mobster has any proof. Besides, falsely accusing someone is a crime. Seeing Fred isn't backing down, the mobster gets angrier. His henchmen ask permission to beat up our hero. With a malicious look, he agrees, saying it's the right thing to do. They all attack the protagonist. However, Fred is tough. He gets into a fighting stance, ready to use his mountain techniques. Diana says she'll call the police, worried about her love. Everyone freezes. He wonders if this is really necessary, but she steps in front of him to protect him, telling the mobster to forget everything. The thug wants trouble and won't let it go. As he is about to hit the girl, our protagonist intervenes with an extremely powerful blow to the shameless man's face. The creep is thrown back, tumbling over his henchmen. He lands hard on the ground. The henchmen charge at our hero, saying they will finish him, but he has many combat techniques, like the side strike, the rock punch, and the tiger fist. He easily defeats all the enemies. Diana is scared and says they are dangerous, but our protagonist says he doesn't care and will do anything to defend a friend. He walks toward the gang leader, who is trembling. He kicks him in the stomach. To humiliate him, he steps on his chest, calling him a spoiled brat. With 2 needles in hand, he says he will make him regret it. He strikes vital points. The guy starts laughing uncontrollably because of the needles. This was a punishment technique he learned from his 6th master. But then he hears Diana scream. One of the thugs has taken her hostage. He says if Fred doesn't remove the needles from his boss, he will shoot. Our protagonist tenses but removes the needles. The leader stops laughing. He doesn't know what Fred did, but it was strange. He asks what the hell our hero did to him. In response, Fred says it was just a traditional technique. The leader proposes a partnership, offering Fred a job. This is strange, as he just got beaten up and now wants to hire him. The villain explains his father runs many businesses, offering Fred money and women. But Fred says he already has a girlfriend and isn't interested. The villain says Diana's boring and he can have prettier, more fun girls. He offers different women every day. Fred slaps him, telling them to leave. The leader asks if he prefers to suffer the consequences rather than work together. They still haven't let Diana go and then start threatening her. The guys say they will take him somewhere else. Since he didn't accept the deal, he'll face the consequences. Our protagonist realizes they are leaving the apartment. These guys think they're smart but are complete idiots. The greasy bald guy keeps threatening Diana. As they descend to the building's lobby, a boy locks the door. They say now that they're in a more spacious area, it'll be easy to beat Fred. They start preparing to do something bad to Diana. The leader says Fred can't escape or hide, and will have to watch everything. But he notices our protagonist is very serious. Fred says dodging a bullet in a closed space is hard, but in an open area, it's easy. He runs like a flash of light at a high speed. His movements are so fast the bald guy can't even see him. When he finally spots the protagonist, he threatens to shoot. But his reflexes are slow, and Fred pushes his hand up, saving the girl. With fists clenched, he prepares to punch. The blow is so powerful it knocks the bald guy to the ground. It happens so fast he can't react. Diana shouts for Rico to be careful as they are coming from behind. In a confident pose, he tells the girl not to worry. He's used to fighting tigers and lions. Holding these weaklings, he says defeating them is nothing. Finally, he lands a precise blow to their chins, sending them flying. The remaining henchman is terrified. The leader prepares to flee, as he's only brave with backup. Trying to open the door, he realizes it's locked. There stands Fred, key in hand, always one step ahead. The guy starts apologizing, scared to death. In a pathetic scene, he even kneels, saying his family has money and can compensate him. To make it worse, he begs for forgiveness. Like any ordinary person, our protagonist is tempted to extort money from the villain, but won't do it because he learned to be honest. This scene is interrupted by someone knocking at the door. He kicks the shameless guy out of the way. Opening the door, he sees powerful people. A man in an elegant suit with several bodyguards asks if he is Rico from the mountains. Stammering a bit, curious, he confirms it's him. After removing his gloves, the man introduces himself, thanking him for saving his father on the train. Our protagonist doesn't recognize him, making the man a bit awkward. The mafia villain in the back is confused about why the young heir of the Yu family is talking to Fred. The shameless mobster tries to interrupt the conversation, but is quickly shut down. He knows he's facing the second heir of the Yu family. The rich man asks if our heir hero is busy. He even offers to deal with the unpleasant mobster. The villain thinks he's doomed. Our hero remembers this young man, is from Grandpa Yu's family. He extends his hand to greet him and asks if the elder is better. They greet each other. The young man compliments our hero, saying his father is doing well. The mobster, still trembling, realizes our hero is brave, having even saved Mr. Yu. Security guards call the second young master. They present our hero with a briefcase full of money as a token of gratitude. There's also an extremely expensive phone, which piques Diana's curiosity. She realizes Fred is important, but she doesn't understand why he was so happy about getting 6 months of free rent. She thinks he did it to please her, and that he's actually rich. She starts to believe he's in love with her. This makes the girl a bit shy. However, our hero can't accept such an expensive gift. He remembers his training with one of his mentors, who taught him not to accept easy money or touch a woman without her consent. Easy money is something everyone wants. His mentor starts hitting him to make him understand he shouldn't give in to temptation. He complains that she's being aggressive. The poor mentor asks if she went too hard, but it's all for his own good, and he shouldn't give in under any circumstances. He learned his lesson, and back in the present, he refuses the money. The second son knew the young man would refuse the gift, as his niece Alice had warned him. We go back a few hours to the Yu family mansion. Alice says the boy has no interest in their family. Her uncle suggests it's because the boy might not know who they are. He wants to return the favor and give the boy a gift. Alice wants her uncle to also give the boy a gift from her. A bit embarrassed, she hands him a small box, saying if he won't accept the money, maybe he'll accept her gift. Back in the present, the man says he won't force the boy to accept. He asks the security guards to take the briefcase away. The mobster is incredulous that the young man refused such a large amount of money. After clapping his hands, another guard brings Alice's gift. Our hero says he doesn't need any gifts, but the man says it's a gift from Alice. Our shameless hero blushes at the thought of that girl. Diana's radar goes off because she heard a woman's name. It's a small box, and our hero wonders what's inside. He says if it's not too expensive, he can keep it. When he opens it, he gasps in surprise. Everyone is curious, as he wasn't even surprised by the money. The gift is a coupon for 3 free burgers. There's also another item in the box. It's a note with a phone. Alice handwrote the note saying the phone is old but has internet, and if he doesn't want it, he can throw it away. Alice's uncle doesn't understand why the boy would accept an old phone when he refused a new one earlier. With a smile, Federico says he'll accept these 2 gifts. The second son is confused. Our hero gives a thumbs up and asks to thank Alice, saying he liked the gifts. The man is bewildered and thinks our hero values friendships over material goods. Turning to the mobster, he realizes our hero is dealing with bandits. He asks Mr. Fred if he wants him to deal with this trash. Our hero looks at the idiot and sees him trembling with fear. The guy starts thinking he's doomed. His henchmen pretend to be dead to avoid consequences. Angrily, the guy kneels, begging for forgiveness. It's very embarrassing and everyone is speechless. Our hero says he doesn't need this man's help. After thanking them, they say it was great meeting him. As he leaves, the young man realizes Federico isn't just an ordinary doctor. This guy has various martial skills, defeating the mobsters alone. While drying his hand, he mentions his father said this guy was incredible. He needs to recruit Fred before his older brother, Alice's father, does. There's probably a family feud going on. The mobsters kneel before Fred, thanking him for everything. Diana is captivated by our hero, finding it unbelievable. Our protagonist asks if the man who just left is really that powerful. The mobster says he's only the second son of the Yu family. In the underworld, he's known as the Elegant Demon. He does all the family's dirty work, and if handed over to him, the mobster wouldn't be alive. Our hero is surprised by his power. Now that he saved the mobsters' lives, Federico has a request. The mobster says he'll grant any wish our hero has. The first request is to leave Diana and her bar alone. The guy swears not to interfere with the girl's life or let anything bad happen to her. Secondly, our protagonist wants information about famous women in the city. The guy is surprised, because Fred said it in front of his girlfriend. Fred wants to meet famous young women between 21 and 25, and they must be beautiful. Nervously, the guys say they'll carry out this mission. Federico tells them to leave. The guys sneak out, grateful for another day of life. Once outside, they start sweating, realizing they almost got beaten up. One of the henchmen helps the boss up and asks if they'll really obey. The guy gets angry, saying even the second son of the Yu family treats Fred with humility and respect. He says this kid will become powerful and they'll reap the benefits. His family will no longer be just fish market bosses, but will rule the entire district. The scene shifts back to Fred, who's cleaning up the mess. Diana's worried because our hero doesn't seem interested in older women and she's already 26. Meanwhile, he's thinking about finding the 7th sister. He has information from the Grand Master that the 7th sister is only slightly older. She should be around 25, as he is 20. Diana thinks he's out of her league, being influential and powerful. She wishes he were her boyfriend, but feels it's a distant dream. If she could date him, she wouldn't have to fear others anymore. She doesn't want to remain a helpless victim. Later, he comes out of the shower and tells Diana it's her turn. The girl is excited and says she's going. He wonders if the mobster got any information. There's a text message from the guy, and our hero struggles with the phone. When Diana closes the door, he gets a bit tense. He hasn't fully realized he's living with a girl. His cheeks flush, and he starts thinking other thoughts. But he's an upright man and can't lead a debauched life. 10 minutes pass, and he hears Diana calling his name. He wonders if he should respond, knowing she's trying to seduce him. She shouts from inside, telling him to open the door. He can't stop thinking about her, as she's very beautiful. With trembling hands, he says he'll check what's happening. Opening the door, there she stands. The girl holds a bottle, her cheeks flushed. This leaves him deeply smitten, and he even gasps. She asks if she's too old for him. He says no, and besides, she's very pretty. Diana had a few drinks and was worried about what our hero said earlier, mentioning she'll be 26 next year. He didn't realize that this hurt her, and this explains there's a reason he's looking for these girls. At that moment, she starts feeling dizzy. The bottle falls to the floor. Like a true hero, he catches her to keep her from falling, facing each other. The scene is incredibly romantic, leaving Diana blushing. She asks if he really thinks she's pretty. He says she's beautiful and apologizes if his comment hurt her. He keeps saying he should act respectfully and not be smitten, but she smells so good. Then the girl asks if he could be her boyfriend. At that moment, she drops the towel, creating an awkward scene for Fred. His face turns red and he gasps. Quickly, he rushes to grab the towel. The girl holds his hands. She says he can relax because she did it on purpose. He knows she drank wine and says he can't do anything, but Diana takes a deep breath and says she's fully conscious. The boy is very tempted to continue, but his training prevents him. He's in the prime of his youth, making it hard to control his instincts. He remembers a training session with his master where he found an injured piglet. The master asked if Fred wanted to save it. The boy says yes and will use his medical skills. The master encourages him to proceed. Fred responds that he must always act with compassion, and as that's a doctor's duty. The old man with a wise look says he should go ahead since it's his choice. Moments later, we see the boy couldn't save the piglet's life, which was traumatic. The piglet died before his eyes. The master says he must face the consequences since he made a choice. The boy cried a lot for not saving the animal. His master pats his head, saying he did the right thing and tried his best. He also said that in the future he'll face many tough choices but must confront the consequences. The boy remembered these lessons. When about to do something he might regret, he meditates on them. He steps back because Diana had some wine, and it wouldn't be right to continue. He holds the towel, while Diana waits for his next move. He dresses her again, leaving her surprised. He says he must always respect women and won't do something he'd regret. Besides, she was very kind to him, giving him 6 months of free rent. This surprises her, as she didn't expect him to be so pure-hearted. Her eyes fill with tears. She hugs our hero, crying loudly. Her cry is so loud it can be heard outside the apartment. As she sleeps, our hero stays by her side, feeling their friendship has grown stronger. His phone rings and he's surprised by the notification. It's a late-night call from Alice. He answers while closing Diana's bedroom door. Fred doesn't know how she got his number, but is glad she did. Alice asks why he didn't message her, as she was anxiously waiting. He says modern phones confuse him, and he doesn't know how to use them. She laughs, saying that he'll learn soon, and sets up lunch with him. Talking about food gets him excited, and he agrees. The girl, smitten, lies in bed and says she'll pick him up the right time tomorrow, and so he hangs up the phone. The girl starts thinking about her grandfather's plans to bring her second uncle closer to the boy. She even thinks her grandfather, now healthy, wants to regain family power from her father. The Yu family is very complicated, and the girl wonders what's really happening. Late at night, our hero is on his phone. The mobster had obtained several photos of beautiful women. He comments that he didn't expect the guy to get so many contacts. However, none of them seem to be the 7th Marshal sister. He then wonders why Alice wants to get closer to him. Though he grew up in the mountains, he's not naive, and knows people are interested in his skills. He thinks his life has become complicated since leaving the mountains. He sees a photo of an attractive blue-haired woman, but when he swipes, he's surprised by another photo. She seems to be the 7th Marshal sister. We see her entering a luxury car, resembling the vision he had. Plus, she wears a pendant that matches the amulet from his master's. He celebrates having found the 7th sister. However, he couldn't see her face clearly, making it difficult. He calls the mobster to ask where the photo was taken. The mobster's playing a game in a bar. He says he'll check the photo to see who the red-haired woman is. One of his companions asks what he's doing. While he yells at the woman, our hero is bored on the other end. He checks all the photos and says he doesn't know where that photo was taken. Fred asks if he's lying. The guy, embarrassed, says it's not a lie. He genuinely doesn't know. Before hanging up, he says he'll find out more about the woman. Now that he knows more about the 7th sister, he's anxious. He tosses the phone on the bed, feeling like he's back to square one. He lies down, eager to find the 7th sister. He remembers he has a date with Alice tomorrow, and she might recognize the place in the photo. With her influence, she can help find the 7th sister. The next day, he wakes up and prepares breakfast. Alice wakes up to a delicious smell. She gets up to check and sees our hero cooking. He says he made a nutritious broth to aid her recovery. Diana mentions he's a great cook, and whoever marries him will be lucky. He says he's not a good cook and only knows the basics. Someone honks outside, and Diana gets curious. Our hero looks out the window and sees it's Alice. She's in a luxury car, which startles him as it's quite early. Diana asks who it is, and he hesitates to answer. Downstairs, Alice shouts for our hero, saying they have a date. He quickly gulps down the soup, not wanting to make Diana jealous. He rushes out, telling Diana he'll be back soon. Poor Diana feels sad for not getting to spend time with him. Looking at the soup, she says they are not from the same world. Downstairs, Alice says she'll give him a city tour before lunch. She says the city is huge, and he'll enjoy seeing some places. They speed off through the city. So this is normal for her, but for Fred, who grew up in the mountains, it's exhilarating. She says he lives too far away. He responds that his masters chose the location and it is comfortable. She offers him to stay with her, as her house is big and she won't charge rent. He declines, feeling it could be another problem. He doesn't like the feeling, as she's intelligent and seems to have a plan for him. He even says free things are often the most expensive, and he doesn't trust her proposal much. However, she seems pure-hearted and just wants to enjoy the day and have fun with him. They speed off. They stop at a shopping mall. She elegantly exits the car and hands the keys to the valet. Meanwhile, our hero is stuck inside, unable to open the door. She shows him how to open it. She mentions many people struggle with their car doors. He feels a bit embarrassed and thanks her, saying he had almost jumped over the car. She says the day will be fun, and she'll buy him new clothes. She grabs his arm and drags him along. She asks what brands he likes, leaving him clueless. He doesn't know any brands. To him, clothes are all the same. Fred doesn't care much for clothes and tries to tell her, but she insists he try some on. Looking at our hero's face, she wonders what style suits him best. She grabs his hand and drags him again, determined to find him a nice outfit. He's struck by how beautiful she is, his heart racing. They pass by several stores. None seem to catch his eye. She starts thinking about what style would suit him. Then she has a brilliant idea. He tries on a casual outfit and looks like a model. Finally, after trying many outfits, he likes this one. The saleswoman seems friendly, but finds this irritating, thinking he can't afford it. She comments that if it were that girl, she'd be more eager to help. Fred asks about the price. The saleswoman says it's $7,700 with a 12% discount for members. She's annoyed, thinking he won't buy it because it's expensive. He feels a bit embarrassed. $7,000 is a lot. He mentions that in the mountains they wouldn't spend that much on food in the year, but Alice quickly pulls out her phone ready to pay. The saleswoman feels slighted as Alice treats the amount casually. She pays in full, revealing she's a millionaire. She asks the saleswoman to wrap up the clothes. Our hero is curious as she just scanned and paid. She explains that's how things work and she'll teach him later. Plus, she added money to his phone account. He tries to find his balance. When he sees $10,000, he's shocked. He exclaims, asking if it's really $10,000, drawing curious looks. She confirms, and he insists he doesn't need that much. Alice paid for the clothes with her own money and added more for him to use during the day. He says he can't accept that amount and tries to return it. She responds that it's her way of showing gratitude. She explains that on that day, he warned her to stay away from people in green, saving her life. She witnessed an accident. She didn't expect that just changing Ayara's clothes would be enough to save her life. She thought he wasn't serious, but what happened made her believe. A few days earlier, when she was with her friend Ayara, they'd witnessed an accident. She didn't fully understand what happened, but only had minor scratches. A man with sunglasses appeared. He pointed a gun at the girls. She thought it was the end. They screamed in fear. On a phone call, someone asked if the woman was wearing black. Someone on the call mentioned a woman in a green dress, and the criminal realized that he had the wrong person. And so, he gets into the car and drives away. By changing clothes, the criminal got confused, and they felt relieved. Ayara hugged her best friend tightly, saying that thanks to Alice, she was still alive. At that moment, Alice realized Fred was right, and his advice had saved them. Therefore, she wanted to gift him that amount because her life was saved by our hero. He asks if she wants more insights to understand that criminal. She says yes, wishing to uncover who was behind it all. Fred warns he will try and begins his meditation. He learned from his masters in the mountains not to use his powers trivially, but since this involves someone's safety, he needed to use his abilities. Alice is surprised to see the Chinese techniques. After meditating a bit, he discovered everything, and she becomes curious. He says this matter doesn't directly involve her, and interfering can make things worse. She asks if there's no way to resolve this and is worried about Ayara. He feels sorry, as the only thing he could sense for now is the energy flow. Alice sighs deeply, knowing that meddling too much could bring trouble to her. She holds our hero's arm tightly. She notes it's almost time for them to eat, and they head out. In his mind, he thinks that even though Alice is friends with Ayara, there's another side to that redhead that the girl doesn't know. The art of foresight couldn't be used indiscriminately, as it could lead to devastating consequences. They arrive at a restaurant where a woman in traditional attire welcomes them. He is shocked as it seems very expensive. The girl tells him not to worry as she will pay, and he should enjoy and eat plenty. With a smile, he agrees to eat a lot. The place is cozy, and Alice orders every dish on the menu. The waitress says the portions are large, and they might not finish them. He confidently says he can eat all the restaurant's food. He mentions he once ate a whole wild boar from the mountains alone. Alice confirms with the waitress to bring one of each dish, saying that they will eat it all. Our hero comments that she's very generous and also rich. The girl is smitten because he called her generous. He says just by looking at her, he imagines she has around 2 million. This makes the girl giggle, as she has much more than that. 2 million is nothing to her. However, she simply says her family has more money than he can imagine. She also promised to fulfill 3 wishes for him, no matter what he asks. He thanks her, saying he will make his wishes wisely. The girl hopes he will wish to be with her, as that would be her greatest wish fulfilled. She's very interested in learning more about our hero, finding him fascinating. At that moment, a woman with purple hair, accompanied by a man, passes by the door. She notices Alice and turns back to check if it's really her. The woman becomes angry, as Alice is intended to marry her third brother. She belongs to the Wang family, as Grandpa Yu mentioned on the train. The woman sees this as an affront to her family and comments to her companion. She finds it unacceptable that the Yu family is disrespecting the Wang family by having Alice with another man, and she decides to confront them. The arrogant woman storms in, kicking the door open, looking for Alice. Alice turns, startled, and our hero becomes curious. The loud mouth declares Alice is to marry her third brother and shouldn't be out with other men. Alice grows worried, recognizing Xian, heir to the Wang family, a very influential figure. The Wang family controls many industries essential to the Yu family, so Alice shouldn't provoke them. She's only out with Fred today and doesn't want him involved in these disputes. Alice insists they're just friends, with no romantic interest. Our hero notices his friend is in trouble, but Xian won't accept Alice being out with any friend, calling it disrespectful. She threatens to end Alice's friendship with Fred, calling him a wimp. Fred, feeling strong, whispers to Alice, offering to remove Xian if she's bothering them. Alice, though scared, grows irritated by Xian's persistence. Xian becomes angrier when Alice refuses to dismiss her friend. To end the argument, Alice reveals she hasn't accepted Xian's brother's marriage proposal. Someone stands up, asking if the Wang family still practice arranged marriages like in feudal times. Xian, furious, asks if Alice dares to defy her family. Turning to her companion, she orders him to deal with Fred. The man cracks his knuckles, boasting he'll crush Fred with one hand. He lunges at Fred, trying to grab his clothes. With a simple tap, Fred disarms him, leaving the man trembling. The man asks what Fred did, as he didn't see it coming. Fred says he merely retaliated. The man thinks he can overpower Fred and attacks again. Fred grabs his wrist and emits energy waves, paralyzing him. The man starts shaking in fear. Fred realizes the man is physically strong but spiritually weak. The man breaks free and tries to punch Fred. With just his palm, Fred sends him flying. The man crashes to the ground like a sack of potatoes. Fred explains to Xian about spiritual deficiency, using a metaphor. He says the man's cannon is rusty, unable to fire cannonballs. Xian is shocked, as her boyfriend has been struggling lately. The man claims he's just tired, but Fred reveals he's sensitive to recent activity. Xian denies involvement and, trusting Fred, checks her boyfriend's phone. The boyfriend runs away, refusing to hand it over, clearly hiding something. Xian chases after him, vowing to eliminate him. Fred remains humble, denying any special abilities. Amidst the chaos, a waitress announces their food is ready. Hungry Alice and Fred celebrate, eager to enjoy the delicious meal. A feast of every dish in the restaurant is served, leaving our hero's mouth watering. Alice thanks Fred for his help, but assures him he didn't need to get involved. His master taught him to always help friends in need. This leaves Alice embarrassed, realizing she's special to him. He continues eating the pork, praising its flavor. Let me explain, it's seasoned with fish powder. So this excites him, as he never imagined seasoning meat with another meat. Alice wants to learn more about Chinese medicine and asks how he knows so much. He says it's not that hard. A bit embarrassed, she asks him to teach her. Our hero is excited to have an apprentice and says it will take 10 years to reach his level. She finds this too long and starts crying, especially since he said it was easy. Fred explains that mastering martial arts takes time and effort, but people today are impatient. She feels scolded and slightly embarrassed, asks him not to regret teaching her. He actually wants to ask a favor, having earned 3 wishes from her. She hopes it's something intimate and is excited to help, but what he really wants is to know where the photo is taken. Alice examines the photo and recognizes the HL company's main building. Fred asks if she knows the location, and she confirms, as every woman knows that building. He asks if she knows the woman in the photo. Of course she does, and asks why he's looking for her. Our protagonist explains she's his 7th older sister. This shocks Alice, as the famous CEO of HSL is his older sister. He scratches his head, asking if this woman's important. He then asks Alice to take him to her. Alice has never contacted this woman, but her family has business with the company. They head to the famous building. On the way, our hero asks about his sister. Alice asks if he shouldn't know more about her being his sister. But our hero explains she left the mountain when he was very young, so he doesn't know her well. Alice reflects on the extraordinary mountain where Fred grew up. She starts telling him about this woman named Zhang, who made a name for herself in the city 2 years ago. As soon as she joined the company, she revolutionized the products and quickly rose to CEO. Alice shares this enthusiastically, as the company is one of the city's top 20. He'll be impressed, as his 7th sister is truly remarkable. Alice adds that the most surprising part is that Zhang is only 23. At 21, Alice says Zhang is her biggest idol. She dreams of being like her in a few years, powerful and intelligent. Our hero believes Alice can achieve this, as she's also very smart. Alice blushes slightly, saying she's lucky to be born into the Yu family. As they approach the building, she appreciates that our hero doesn't pry for family information. They arrive at the HSL company headquarters. He eagerly heads to the door, saying he'll go in and talk to his sister. He's captivated by the grand building and proud of his sister, but Alice asks him to wait, as unauthorized persons can't enter. Security asks for his ID. He looks at another man's ID and tells security he doesn't have that card. Security says he can't enter, as it's not visiting hours. Fred says he's Jiang's younger brother and wants to speak with her. When they hear the CEO's name, they find it strange. They start laughing, saying many people show up claiming the same thing. He thumps his chest, asking if the guards don't believe him. The guards mock him and tell him to leave, as he's causing a disturbance. One of the security leaders decides to inform Mr. Zhang. The man answers and asks the mustached man what's happening at the entrance. We see this Mr. Zhang is important and learns a boy is looking for Zhang. The stern man orders the security leader to get rid of the boy. He also says to always eliminate anyone seeking the CEO. The mustached man hangs up, saying he'll handle it now. He's been pulling strings for Zhang, who is the deputy director, aiming for benefits. We learn this man is in love with Zhang and won't let anyone near her. He even has a photo of her kissing it, saying she belongs to him. He returns to our hero and says he'll wait outside for his sister. A guard says he can't wait at the building's door. The mustache man starts making a scene, saying our protagonist is tarnishing the company's reputation. The other guards are startled, wondering why the mustache man is so nervous. He whispers to them that they can't let the boy stay. A guard asks if he's a mad dog, saying they can't kick him off the street. As he finishes speaking, the nervous old man slaps our hero. Fred's cheek turns red from the slap. The old man cracks his knuckles, saying he'll finish off our protagonist. Alice starts screaming for them to stop fighting. Rico asks Alice if she saw who started the fight. In a chilling way, he says they awaken the monster. Feeling his fury rising, she senses he's not joking around. With impressive speed, he appears before the mustached man, grabbing his clothes. He says he's full of accumulated rage, and even as a doctor, he's powerful. The man starts trembling and shouts for the other guards to finish off the boy. Seeing the chaotic fight, the guards start to fear. The mustached man orders them to restrain Fred, but he is thrown to the ground with great force. He prepares another attack, saying they started the trouble. Fred hits the shameless man. His assistants rush to stop our hero, but we all know Fred is very brave. This leaves Alice a bit scared. He seems like a wild monster that not even dozens of guards can stop. After a few moments, he defeats all the guards. Fred even asks them to get up and continue the fight, but they say their salary is too low to endure this and pretend to be unconscious. At that moment, a car arrives. It's Chenche, and she asks what happened. The mustache man explains a boy beat them up and tells her to call the police. She tries to understand and can't believe one man did this. In a gloomy way, he asks if she also works at the company. I confess, it seems our protagonist might have become a villain. He's very agitated. The assistant screams in fear. She says this young man is terrifying and I will call the police. But another woman exits the car. It's Miss Jiang, and her assistant says one boy defeated all the other guards. We see this woman is very beautiful, and it was worth waiting to meet the first sister. The woman asks if this boy really caused all the commotion. The assistant confirms, saying the blue-haired boy did it. At that moment, Alice is thrilled, as she saw her biggest idol. Our hero approaches and asks if she is his seventh sister. The woman looks him up and down, assessing the situation. The atmosphere is tense, and she doesn't respond. Her assistant wonders what's happening. Jiang asks if he has proof she's his older sister. The assistant is confused. Federico reaches into his pocket for his amulet. He realizes it's gone and is shocked. He sees his pocket is torn and likely lost it in the chaos. The redhead says she'll call the police if he can't prove he's her younger brother. He feels doomed, as his older sister thinks he's a delinquent. Alice says the amulet is in the car and throws it to him. He catches the amulet mid-air, relieved. He shows it to his seventh sister, confirming they're from the same sect. Seeing the amulet, she's convinced he's her little brother. The assistant whispers, asking if they should call the police. Jiang says no, she has important matters to discuss with him in her office. This leaves Assistant Chenche startled, as Jiang never takes anyone there. She wonders if he's really her boss's brother. Jiang orders Federico to follow her. The assistant is unsure what to do with security. Jiang orders her to send them all away. They hear this and complain and not wanting to work there anymore. Alice watches from afar, finding Jiang even more impressive. She believes more in the mountain sect Fred came from. She even imagines a fanfic where Jiang takes care of her younger brother. The security chief informs Jiang he's been fired and needs help for revenge. Jiang, on the other line, starts shouting, getting nervous. He discovers Jiang is taking another man to her private office. This drives him mad, as he's obsessed with her. Like a child losing in a game, he throws his phone. He can't accept the love of his life being with another man in her office. Entering the office, Federico finds it luxurious. It's more like a 5-star hotel. Jiang says they can talk safely there about anything. She assures him the entire floor belongs to her, and no one will disturb them. Our hero is captivated, feeling like he's in a garden. His older sister offers him coffee, asking if he wants sugar. Never having tried coffee, he says no sugar. Jiang is curious about his reaction to the drink. He receives the cup and thanks her. Before drinking, he smells it and finds it pleasant, but upon tasting, he finds it bitter and regrets not adding sugar. She leans in close, asking about his mountain training. He says he trained hard with the 7 masters and is happy. This makes her glad. Suddenly, she pulls up his sleeve to check something. He blushes, asking what she's doing. She says she needs to confirm one more thing to be sure he's her little brother. She remembers him as a baby, left at the sect's door. He cried a lot and had 2 birthmarks on his right arm. Pulling up his sleeve, she sees the same birthmark. Her eyes fill with tears, overcome with emotion. She hugs her little brother, saying she missed him greatly. Jiang says she waited for him all this time, leaving Fred a bit confused. It's strange the masters hid her presence for so long. Even using his power, he couldn't find information about her. Jiang then asks if our hero really knew nothing. He doesn't understand, so she asks him to use his power on her pulse and check for himself. Fred imagines she might have a spiritual deficiency. He sits down to examine his sister's health. After some time, he asks if the masters knew about her condition. She confirms they did, but couldn't cure her extreme cold constitution. Our hero remembers his master teaching about celestial deficiencies and realizes he studied this ailment to cure his sister. She asks if he also finds it complicated to resolve. Fred explains that in traditional Chinese medicine, there are 2 types of ailments: celestial and terrestrial deficiencies. Both are difficult to cure, and she mentions trying various remedies without success. He admits the treatments are complex, but suggests a way to resolve it. She's curious, but he shows hesitation in proposing the cure and ends up asking if she's married. She says she isn't, as she hasn't found anyone suitable for dual cultivation. That's how they refer to it in this story, but you can imagine what dual cultivation means. Our protagonist blushes and says he knows someone with the perfect yang constitution for her dual cultivation. She's thrilled, as this could cure her ailment. To ease things a bit, Fred explains that the cultivation doesn't need to be extreme and can just be an energy exchange, if you catch my drift. This makes Jiang a bit embarrassed, and she asks if a simple kiss would suffice. He confirms and says they need to do it as soon as possible to prevent her condition from worsening. Fred tries to avert his gaze, as the topic's quite embarrassing. His sister says they need to find the person he mentioned as soon as possible. He explains she needs to perform this cultivation twice a day for 6 months to cure her ailment, and she agrees. He ends up spilling his coffee. She asks why he did that, and he says it's nothing. Just thought she might find another way to solve the problem. Since she wants to resolve it faster, they could do the intense cultivation, which might work better. Jiang says her masters told her she'd only survive until 27 due to her ailment, so she's in a hurry. Our hero knows this is true, as most people with this condition pass away young. She slams her hand on the table and says she'll organize a search for someone with young energy. She thanks him for sharing his knowledge and promises to give him what the masters asked her to keep for him once she's better. Our protagonist says that's not important now. They should focus on her health. He asks if she's ready for the cultivation, and she says she has no choice. His sister hadn't paid attention when he mentioned he already knew someone with yang energy. When he mentions it again, she's excited and offers him a great reward. However, he doesn't mention it's actually a woman and is afraid she'll refuse. But when she hears it's a woman, his sister is relieved. as she'll maintain her chastity. He's relieved she accepted it well and says she's very proper. Jung says she's saving herself for her future husband. She won't use her body for benefits and has preserved herself. This makes Fred admire his older sisters even more. They exchange contact information, and our hero finds her status a bit strange. Still, he accepts the friend request. Before leaving, he says he'll update his sister later after sorting things out with his friend. As he's about to leave, she asks if he's not curious why the masters wanted him to meet her. He thought it was just to cure his sister, but she says there's more. He has an important mission from the sect of 7 saints. She explains he must continue the sect's martial legacy. He's confused, asking what this mission entails. She explains the sect of 7 saints is a union of 7 major martial sects in China. He's skeptical, as his mountain sect seemed like an abandoned village, more like an internet tale. Still, he won't disrespect his master's wishes and accepts the mission. She explains he must listen carefully to the instructions and touches the amulet. A portal opens, and she retrieves a letter. It's a message from one of his masters saying only he can complete this mission. He must accept a disciple within 3 months, and once he does, the 7th sister will hand over the supreme treasure of the sect of 7 saints. Our hero is nervous, as he's never had a disciple before. She says this is the first step of the mission, and if he can't find a disciple, he won't be able to establish his own sect. He receives the letter and vows to do his best. She offers him a job at her company. After what happened with her security, he could replace them but would need an interview first. He says if he joins her company, it will cause gossip, which neither wants. Before leaving, he thanks her for her kindness. She watches her little brother go, noting how cautious he is. She's glad he's matured during this time. As his older sister, she knows she can't stand idly by without helping him. She sends him a message, inviting him to dinner at a restaurant and sending 10,000. Receiving such a large amount, he's startled and feels rich. Our hero doesn't like receiving gifts but loves food, so he'll use the money for meals. He decides to go straight to a market to buy ingredients. Leaving the company, he realizes Alice isn't there, and notes it's almost night, indicating he spent a lot of time inside. He sets his apartment address on his GPS to run home, but he hears Alice calling him. She asks why he's in such a hurry and if he didn't expect her to be waiting. He asks if she really waited for him outside. She jokes, saying yes, and that she couldn't have traveled to the future to find him. This makes him blush. She also feels a bit embarrassed, as it's clear she has feelings for him. She apologizes, saying she only waited because she was worried he'd get lost on his way home. He thanks her, calling her a true friend, and invites her to dinner. She accepts without hesitation and asks where they're eating. Excitedly, he names the restaurant from the note she gave him. This makes her a bit disappointed, as it's not a place a man would typically take a woman. Still, she's not picky and agrees to go. They speed off in the car. From above, that shameless guy is watching our hero. It seems they're following our Fred, mentioning he's with a pink-haired girl. He tells his henchman to follow our hero and not let him escape. They plan to teach Fred a lesson for messing with the Zhang family. You know this villain's gonna get beaten up, no need for many details. It might not be now, but he's gonna get it. He can't believe our protagonist managed to enter Jiang's office. He says if this continues, the boy will even go to her house. He refuses to be left behind and starts destroying everything, saying no one will take his woman. A minute later, they arrive at the restaurant. He's excited, saying he wants to try the fried chicken. Opening the door, they're greeted by a delicious smell. We see someone following them. It's that shameless bigot with his henchman. The guy even pulls a knife from his pocket, saying this time they won't lose to our hero. The scene changes to a pink-haired girl trying to hand the phone to the stud. But then the man grabs her arm, pulling her close by the waist. He says that women are easy. And then he answers the phone someone is calling him. But at that moment, the phone goes silent. The stud wonders if the person on the phone didn't agree. On the phone, they say they would finish off that kid, but they could silence him. Then the stud hangs up, and all the while he's holding the woman. The crazy guy squeezes the girl's neck, saying he'll finish his plan. The scene changes to the hospital, and we see a child who is a patient. The child is even using breathing equipment. This guy is called Gustavo, and he's in the room saying he has done many bad things in life. But he calls someone with his cell phone, so he pays attention to the video call. He also sees a picture of Federico apologizing to him. Then we go to the restaurant. Fred is there thinking about what he will eat. Alice is with him to eat at the restaurant. The girl wonders why people haven't eaten that food before. It's embarrassing. The line is moving and the server asks the customer what they want. Of course, the chubby guy orders the biggest hamburger on the menu, and the server asks what size he wants. The crazy guy orders the biggest hamburgers, and Fred, who is in line, gets a little annoyed because of the wait. But the server is talking about the sizes of the hamburgers and even shows with his hand how big the sandwich is. And we see that the sandwich is pretty big, right? And while Fred is listening to this, he thinks these guys are dumb. The chubby guy annoys him and he leaves the line. Then it's our main character's turn to order. He orders big hamburgers, and then the server accepts the order. Fred is surprised by this situation. Then the hamburger arrives with his fries. Fred is excited about it. He has never eaten at a place like this, but Alice's sis tells him to calm down or he'll choke while eating. Then these men enter the restaurant. They watch our main character eating, and one of the bad guys asks the boss what they're going to do, but they just sit at a table and watch. Federico notices strange guys there, and it gets the attention of our main character. He looks back carefully and wonders what is happening. He sees that it's that shameless guy, and they start pretending they are not doing anything wrong. Fred realizes that it's the guard who he beat up a few hours ago. Alice gets our hero's attention to look somewhere else. He looks to the sides that were pointed out without understanding very well. There is another woman with a guy, and Federico doesn't understand who it is. But Alice already realized that it was a rich woman helping her boyfriend. In Alice's view, it was very cute and looked like a very romantic couple. But the rich woman starts coughing a lot. She doesn't understand what is happening, and her boyfriend asks if she is okay. But it was obvious that this blonde kid was just another shameless person, and everything was going according to his plan. The woman even falls to the ground, scared, not understanding what was happening. The blonde kid asks to call an ambulance, pretending to be scared. He tells the attendants that his woman's having breathing problems, and the attendant calls the ambulance. Alice is confused about the breathing problems there, and if it's contagious. But Fred soon understands that it was actually just poisoning. Alice was still very scared, and because of this, Fred explains that the poison is blocking her breathing. Our main character goes on to say that the person who poisoned her must have acted a long time ago. Alice didn't understand very well. She asks if the person who did this was there, and then a mysterious man appears saying that our hero was right. Fred gets up from his chair and asks if that gentleman was actually a doctor. The man says yes, and that he was actually more than just a doctor. The restaurant server tells the staff to call the ambulance again, and that the woman was even having a collapse. Meanwhile, her boyfriend just wished her harm. He was smiling in an evil way, as if he had always planned for this moment. The doctor and our main character decide to take a look at the woman. But the doctor warns that without equipment, it will be very difficult to save her life. Fred understands the situation, but he decides to take a look anyway. Our main character's master once said that he should help people giving his best, so he leaves the doctor's table to do what the master had ordered, which was to save people's lives. Our main character goes to the woman, and the doctor gets up saying he'll help him. He couldn't just watch. Meanwhile, Alice just watched the whole situation. She was happy that our hero was acting on his own. Approaching the woman, our main character decides to check, and the doctor asks how she is. Fred says that she actually only has 10 minutes to live. Then that blonde kid gets angry with our main character and asks who he is. After finding out that the people were doctors, he is a little surprised. Soon after that, the doctor opens the woman's mouth, and our main character decides to check her pulse. The blonde kid is a little nervous with this whole situation, and he was even afraid of being caught, but realizing that the poison had been acting for a long time, he thinks that there's nothing more that can be done. Fred says that the only way to help this woman would be to do an operation right there. And then the blonde kid is all excited. Obviously, Federico had a plan. He always has a card up his sleeve. And the doctor decides to ask what method he was thinking of using at that moment, since there was no equipment there. Fred says that he'll break the talisman, and she would drink the water that comes out of it. For those who didn't understand Chinese medicine, they weren't understanding anything. And the doctor didn't expect our main character to actually be able to do anything. The boyfriend is there, all excited, thinking that the woman will kick the bucket. But he looks directly at our main character and ends up feeling a certain discomfort. He even pretends he was crying, saying that his girlfriend was in critical condition and that any method would work. Soon, our main character asks for a pen and paper. After that, he begins to invoke the 12 gods of thunder. The first would serve to protect her life, and after that, he makes an oath to the gods. Meanwhile, that blonde kid was just watching that scene, hoping his girlfriend would kick the bucket soon. Alice was already understanding our main character's methods, and she wonders what he would do now. The doctor is a little upset, thinking that it won't work, and soon after, our main character asks the server to bring a glass of water and also a lighter. He approaches with the paper near the woman, and then he starts burning the talisman he had just made. After that, he throws everything into a glass of water, and the next step was to make the woman drink that liquid. Quickly, she starts drinking everything, and the doctor leaves thinking that it was just nonsense. Meanwhile, the blonde kid decides to record a post on the internet, but then something incredible happens. The woman begins to regain her consciousness. She wonders what had happened to her, and everyone is paralyzed. Knowing that Fred had managed to do something that seemed impossible, the blonde kid starts to panic, and the doctor was surprised that the woman had woken up at that moment. The blonde kid didn't understand how our main character managed to cure his woman, and the doctor also found it all very strange. He even thought it was nonsense, but the only one who still believed in Federico was Alice. Then she starts thinking about having children with our main character. I told you that this girl is extremely in love. Meanwhile, the woman was talking to our main character about her being poisoned. Fred explains that she had not eaten any poisoned food, but that in fact someone had put poison in her mouth. The woman wonders how the hell she would poison herself like that without noticing, and the server already gets out of the way, saying that he has nothing to do with it, and that the restaurant doesn't put poison anywhere. Meanwhile, Fred already understood that it wasn't the restaurant's fault. He points his finger at the blonde kid, saying that it was actually his fault, and this was understood very well because the kid is making a guilty face. Meanwhile, the woman says that her man would never do that kind of thing in his life. That shameless guy takes advantage of this, and says that he loves his woman, the rich old lady, very much. She warns our main character not to make false accusations. The store clerk says they have nothing to do with it. The crazy guy was very worried about receiving a lawsuit. The doctor affirms that our main character's point of view is correct, and he approaches the woman and says that her food was poisoned long before, so probably she wasn't poisoned there in that restaurant. And the blonde kid starts to get even more scared, with these doctors arriving at the restaurant. Soon after, the woman starts to get desperate and asks her husband to tell the truth soon. The boy starts trembling with rage and runs out of there, demonstrating that he was truly the culprit. Meanwhile, the ambulance ends up taking the woman to the hospital to finish the care. Someone starts clapping for our hero, and he looks back scared, finding who was doing it. All the people in the restaurant were thanking him, clapping because he had just saved a person's life. He even smiles a little suspicious. The doctor affirms that our main character was actually doing something very good, and that he had a lot of talent. Meanwhile, Federico tries to talk to the doctor about the things that had just happened. He talks about all that being actually a Chinese martial art, and the doctor ends up actually accepting all that information. As a precaution, he ends up handing a card to Fred and asks him to call him doctor. whenever necessary. He accepts the card and ends up getting very excited. Those shameless guys who are looking at our main character will wonder how he actually became a hero. In the heads of these guys, he was a villain. Our main character was the villain, that they were the good guys. So they realized that Fred was not as weak as they were thinking. Because of this, their boss ends up getting irritated, saying that they cannot question the boss's method. Our main character goes back to sit at the same table where Alice was. He wonders if she would be laughing at his face. In fact, she was very happy. That's why she was laughing like a happy fool. She was actually in love and creating fanfics in her head. She even begins to feel a very great admiration for him. Fred smiles and says that one day he would teach her to do that kind of thing. She says that she would like to make a pinky promise with him, and so they end up getting closer. She asks him to promise that he will teach her to be a great martial apprentice. And from that moment on, Fred would be obliged to teach her he could not forget that kind of thing. Soon after, her phone starts ringing. She gets quite worried and says that she needs to prepare for what is happening. It seemed to be something quite urgent, and she says that she'll go back home as soon as possible. In this way, Alice gets up saying that it is urgent and that she needs to leave running. They wonder what the hell is happening. Then Alice says that she needs to leave, and our main character affirms that he will go with her. Those shameless guys decide to follow our hero along with the girl. Alice affirms that she would go out with the protagonist in another opportunity, demonstrating that it really was something urgent. He says that there is no problem at all, but he would love to go out with her next time. This urgent problem that she was having was related to the Vang family. Alice says that she is in great danger, and so she needs to run home to solve these problems, and scared, she follows her way. Meanwhile, our main character is there without understanding anything and didn't know what he could do to help her. Those shameless guys decide that they will go there to get even with our hero Federico. He's already on alert because they knew that these guys were bothering him. He asks if by chance these people decided to come back there to take a beating. The mustachioed guy decides to pull out the knife there and point it at our hero's back. They needed to talk to Fred, and without knowing what to do, Federico decides to accept this situation. However, he asks people not to cause trouble there at the bus stop because there were many innocent people. The guy accepts, saying that there is no problem at all, and really a widespread fight in this place could put several people at risk. Our main character along with the guys go to another place. They said that they would end our main character's life, but Federico doesn't understand why they were doing this. The guy just caused a confusion trying to enter his sister's building, and now the crazy guys were chasing our hero. He didn't understand why these guys were so annoying. The mustachioed guy says that our main character thinks too much of himself, and Federico is making fun of the guys, asking why they were so fixated on him. Then they say that our hero touched someone's woman, but Fred doesn't understand who that woman would be, since he didn't do anything wrong with anyone. He had many opportunities to do something with some women, he just didn't do anything because he was kind of silly, until they say that Brother Zhang is eyeing a woman. She was a beautiful redhead woman called Zhang. Federico is there paying attention because Zhang was one of his sisters. The shameless guy advances with this knife in the direction of our main character, but obviously our hero managed to dodge, and he even watched the knife with that guy, until he advances to a counterattack, and so he gives a karate blow with everything on the head of the crazy guy. The other thugs decide to advance on our hero, but Fred noticed that everyone was with very slow movements. In instance, he decided to finish with everyone and ends up stepping with everything on this shameless guy and asks if he'll spill the beans soon. Why were they chasing him? That guy wouldn't tell anything about what would be happening. But our main character presumes that that guy's family was of a very high level. The boss passes the position to our main character, saying that now he was the boss. So Fred decides to ask where that guy was. But that man doesn't answer that because there was someone behind Fred. He points a gun at our hero, and the guy says he won't tell the truth, nothing at all. Scared Federico, he doesn't understand who that person was. The boss, who was under our main character's feet, ends up leaving, and asks why that guy hadn't shot our hero yet, but the man with the gun asks everyone to leave from there. Scared, they decide to say that it was time to get the protagonist all together, and Fred knew that he was stronger than everyone who was there, however he wouldn't be able to dodge a shot at that distance. So the boss decided to advance on our hero. At that moment, a bullet ends up passing near him. The guy notices and asks why the other crazy guy had done that again. The man who was with the gun asks everyone to leave and says that he will not repeat it again. Scared, they decide to leave because that was very dangerous. However, Fred wasn't understanding anything of what was happening, and all that seemed very confusing. So the man says that he would break our hero's legs, so our gentleman thinks that he could do that at that exact moment. That's why he even starts to do a cultivation in his hand to try to find out who this crazy guy was. He discovered everything he needed. He had seen a scene in a hospital. In that place was the man with that child in bed, and our hero. He knew that this was the biggest obsession of the man's life. He would like to save his daughter's life, so the guy decided to advance against our protagonist. But before that, Federico asks if that would make his daughter's life be saved, and in the middle of the air, the man stops the attack. Fred understands that this was a unique chance, so he ends up turning with everything to confront that guy. But the gentleman ends up taking a knife out of his pocket and decides to advance against the protagonist. Fred gets scared, and he didn't understand where the guy took that new weapon from, however he managed to dodge that attack, and tells the guy to go calmly, because they should resolve everything in the conversation. However, the guy doesn't hear anything and ends up ignoring, and continues with an attack, taking his knife. He gets up and goes towards our hero. Without mercy, Fred manages to dodge again and defends the other attack, and it is at that moment that that man counterattacks, giving a punch in Federico's face. Our protagonist then returns with a knee to the stomach, and so they move away from each other. This guy was quite powerful, and our hero recognizes that he was a worthy opponent. And the man also realizes that our protagonist was very powerful, and that it would be a quite difficult battle. However, this gentleman runs away to get his weapon. Our hero doesn't understand what he should do, so he ends up running and tries to push the gentleman as far as possible. However, someone ends up managing to get the weapon. It was the gentleman, and he already cocks ready to shoot. At that moment, Fred managed to hold the guy's hand and throwing the weapon up, giving a shot. Soon because of that, he gives a punch with everything in his chest, and with the other hand, the gentleman decides to take the knife to try to counterattack our main character. Fred knew that that gentleman's daughter was in a critical state in the hospital, and the gentleman is paralyzed, knowing that our protagonist was a doctor. Fred knew that this guy's daughter was suffering from a quite rare disease, and that no doctor was managing to cure her. However, the man, he didn't understand how our hero knew all that information. In fact, he only guessed all that. The guy's using his cultivation. Our protagonist says that he could save his daughter, but the guy doesn't believe much in traditional Chinese medicine. He says that that wouldn't work in any way. And Fred knew that many people also didn't believe. However, Fred, he was different. He knew how to do that kind of thing, and still warns that he could help his little daughter. Because of that, the gentleman, he gets completely confused and doesn't know if he should trust or not in Frederico. He asks our protagonist where his wife was since she had disappeared some time ago. Our hero says that he has no problem in finding her, and that he will do that at that exact moment. So using his powers, he ends up finding this gentleman's wife. She was in a park near the city center, so the man feels relieved, and even ends up believing in Fred. But it's at that moment that Frederico says that this was the last place that she was before losing her life. The gentleman gets very scared and gets completely shaken, and even lets his weapon fall on the ground trembling. He was in shock. He couldn't believe it. He even starts to believe in our protagonist that he has divine powers, and that he will even be able to save his daughter. Fred was confident that he could really save that little girl. However, he couldn't do that simply for free. The gentleman asks how much money Frederico wants for him to be able to perform the surgery that will save the girl. However, our hero didn't want money. He only wanted to know who was behind all that. The gentleman warns that the boss helped a lot. The staff, then the protagonist, asks if his sense of justice was more important than his daughter's life. The gentleman says that he can't betray his boss since he helped him a lot. Then Frederico smiles, saying that that was a loyal man, and that he admired that in people. However, our protagonist was not going to force that guy to tell things that he couldn't, and so he decides to go to the hospital to save the little girl. The man goes presenting the hospital rooms to our hero, until arriving at his daughter, who is in a terminal state. Frederico watches that with great attention and decides to check the girl's pulse using his powers. He touches his hand on that girl's pulse. He realizes that the girl really had a quite serious disease, and it was a disease that affected her whole body. The gentleman quickly asks if that could be cured, and Frederico says that there's a way to do that. The gentleman asks what that method would be. However, it needed to reach a level of very strong medicine to be able to save the little girl. The father there gets anguished and asks what they should do to save her, and with that, Fred asks him for a little more time. He explains that the girl's body is very weak, and that if he uses his power there, the girl may not resist. The gentleman understands this situation very well, and Fred says that the next time he returns, he'll be sure of which method would be the most efficient to save the girl's life. In this way, he leaves the hospital and starts walking through the streets. He was thinking about which technique he could use to save her life, since if he used the methods that he knows, it could be that the little girl would not resist. Soon someone appears holding a rope saying to tie that person well. Fred gets curious when listening to these words, since it was something quite suspicious. Looking closer, he realizes that he has already heard this voice somewhere before. The man asks people to be quiet, so Fred decides to check what was happening. He was hungry but decides to jump the wall to see if there was someone in danger. When holding onto the wall, he managed to jump over it, and so he starts jumping between the balconies. He learned these techniques of jumping there on top of the walls with one of his masters, and at a distance he sees that blonde kid there from the restaurant. His woman was tied up, and Fred realizes that they're setting up something horrible like this. A woman appears asking to release her. Frederico doesn't understand who it could be, and even realizes that it is becoming a quite big confusion. In fact, who was there shouting and trembling with fear was Diana, his friend. And so Fred realizes that there was a kinship between this woman and Diana. The lady who was tied up was her mother, and keeps apologizing. The girl asks them not to do that with her mother, and Diana ends up getting quite scared. The blonde kid asks for a quite big amount of money to be able to release her mother. However, she didn't have all that money and didn't know what to do, and starts crying a lot. So they offer a discount in the value of the rescue. Seriously, guys, these people here are quite annoying. If she didn't accept, his brothers would not allow Diana. She starts screaming a lot, saying that she doesn't have all that money. So the guy goes there and starts squeezing her cheek and threatens the girl, and says that the only way for her mother to be released is if she pays that absurd amount of money there. Diana asks what he wants since she has no money. It could be something else she could give her bar, or even her apartment, but he says no, he wanted 10 million reais. Diana's mother gets desperate and starts telling the girl, don't give that money. Even because Diana wouldn't have 10 million reais to give to this crazy guy, right? And this makes the guy even more irritated. Then the others start arriving, saying that she couldn't escape Diana. She starts to get desperate, since more people were arriving there, and she even thinks that she will have no way out, that she and her mother will go up in smoke. However, in fact, guys, that was just a deception, and she is shocked to know that her mother was also participating in that. Her mother gets up and admits that she did everything as planned. And the boy? He also confirms, saying that everything was alright, Diana. She's scared not knowing how to react because her mother was participating in this. She realizes that she was betrayed by her own mother and starts trembling a lot. So she decides to ask her mother why she did this. Fred was there from afar watching that whole scene, and he was as irritated as her. Poor Diana was trembling with fear, and she asks for no one to approach, warning that she will call the police, but the man ends up holding her cell phone. The girl gets completely scared, gets all horrified. Her mother said that it was not necessary to call the police, and the blonde kid affirms that it is not necessary, and suggests to finish with Diana right there. The other guys approach to do some evil that I can't say here. And she screams a lot asking for help. Our main character, seeing all that, he decides that he couldn't support that scene anymore, and ends up jumping down there to hit everyone. He was just passing by there and decided to help. Rico asks Diana if she was having problems, and she is surprised to see that our hero always appears when needed. The blonde kid too is also surprised, and doesn't know why the hell this kid was chasing him to always end his plans. He says that he couldn't let Rico leave from there, so he takes a knife and advances against our hero. However, he was very slow, and our protagonist was very powerful, and with that, Fred gives a simple slap and disarms the guy throwing him back. Our hero prepares to hit a vital point of him, and the boy starts complaining, saying that it was hurting a lot. And in a confident way, he even starts to boast there of his skills. Without understanding anything, the guy asks Rico to stop, and I even imagine that he is some superhero or something like that. Walking slowly, Fred holds his shoulder and tells the boy to be quiet. He warns that now he could spend the rest of his life without moving in a bed. The boy is paralyzed without any reaction, and the woman approaches asking what had happened. Rico holds Diana's hands and warns that at that moment they would leave. The girl's mother kneels asking to release the blonde boy, and Diana then approaches her mother. She ends up giving a slap with everything on her face, and the girl affirms that from that moment on she would have no more mother. The woman says that this was not possible, but Diana, crying, she ends up turning around and goes away with a mother like that, who also needs an enemy. Time passes and she and the protagonist go to another place. She watches the wind passing in that anime climate. Rico approaches and warns that he didn't call the police, and Diana, she ends up thanking our hero. She still affirms that she was abandoned since she was little, and continued saying that she has no family. From now on, she would proceed with our hero, and says that she doesn't need to have a family anymore. The poor girl, she was quite needy, guys, so she tries to jump off the bridge, and our protagonist runs to try to help her. However, it seemed that was too late, and she was already falling. Fred didn't know what to do and gets a little desperate. The girl goes falling in the water and starts to sink. However, Rico managed to help her in time and takes her to his apartment. He scolds the girl, asking her to never do that again, and meanwhile Diana asks why she had been saved. Fred thinks about what he will say, but he doesn't know very well what to say. He ends up taking her to the apartment and leaves her there. He also takes the opportunity to take a bath, and then warns that nothing is more important than having self-love. And Diana? Poor girl. After having passed all this, she just stays there watching the situation, then tries to hit on our protagonist as always, right guys? But at that moment, someone ends up calling them our main character. He takes the cell phone to see who is making the call. Diana, she gets a little upset for having been interrupted, let's say, and our protagonist answers and already goes asking who is it. It was the seventh sister Jiang who was calling him there. The protagonist gets excited to know that it was she who was calling him on his phone, so she asks how his cultivation was with the staff of the rooms. Diana hears and asks if it was with her that our protagonist was talking. At that moment, he ended up being a little careless and almost let her hear the cell phone there. Fred takes it off the speakerphone and keeps saying that the signal was terrible. Trying to disguise, he promises that he'll call again when the signal improves Diana. She doesn't understand anything that was happening and gets a little curious. Time passes and he finishes the call, saying that he understood everything. Everything there that his sister wanted to say. A woman on the other side realizes that his voice seemed sad, as if something had happened. He apologizes for leaving Diana waiting while returning to the room. She asks if she can help in some way, and he says that one of his sisters, she has a terrible disease, and maybe would need some help there from Diana. But for that, right? To be able to help his sister, Diana would have to cultivate with her, if you understand me. Diana, hearing this, she said that she accepts any kind of thing to help our main character. If it was to help, everything would be alright. He doesn't understand very well how that was happening, and it was quite easy to convince her. Even so, he ends up thanking for everything. He had put Diana in that quite strange condition there, and he says that he would do anything to help her too. He was not an ungrateful friend. She asked to sleep with him that night, so since he would do anything, Rico doesn't understand why she wants that kind of thing. Time passes and he can't sleep very well. He thought that sleeping meant something else, and I'm sure you also thought. But Diana just wanted to sleep, really. When adjusting, the girl ends up passing over there of the plush duckling. She holds well in Rico's shoulder, and soon after she starts walking with her hand all over his body. The girl's leg also ends up touching some other places, and he feels that he was bound to happen a turnaround. But soon after the scene changes to another city, we end up appearing and takes off her glasses. She thinks if Rico was doing everything right and looking around, she gets a little scared. She imagines that Rico could be fine, and ends up reflecting how he was created by the Masters, and if he had had a good training. She still ends up affirming that he was chosen to be the best in everything since he had a lot of attention from the Masters, and after getting a little worried there with her little brother, she ends up giving a deep sigh. She laments having found only weak people in her search there, to get the cure for her disease. But she remembers that Fred found an ideal person to do the cultivation of yin-yang. So basically, he was saving her life. Now she even decides to take a pill, saying that it is about the destiny of our main character, and still comments that this destiny, if it is not very well controlled, can lead him to lose his life. Time passes, and finally arrives the day of Diana's cultivation there with Jong, the main character. He managed to sleep a little, but his blood flowed very fast throughout his body. Seeing Diana sleeping, he ends up poking her to see if the girl would wake up. At that moment, he remembers that the disease there of the little girl called Praga could be treated in a quite strong way. Using an ancient medicine that he had already studied, he could cut the flow of energy that passed through her body, thus making the disease be stabilized. So he gets up running and asks why he hadn't thought of that before. This ends up waking up Diana, who asks what was happening. He thanks her for having slept in his arms since it made him remember this ancient technique. He warns that there is something very important that he needed to do so. He runs away. Diana gets a little confused with this situation, but couldn't do anything. Now our protagonist goes running there to the city center. He already calls the little girl's father, is waiting for him there at the hospital, and warns that he is running as fast as possible there because he discovered a way to save her life. Women who come running realize that his speed is very high and ask how he managed to run so fast. He apologizes for causing a disturbance. But it is that Frederico had found a way to cure that guy's daughter. So he was determined enough to proceed to the hospital to cure the little girl. That was very good, so he was very excited. He should be very worried, thinking that he would not be able to save that poor little girl. Arriving at the hospital, the staff was already around, and he says that he ran about 30 km to arrive at the hospital as fast as possible. The man ended up getting scared with Fred having run 30 km, and he didn't believe in that. He keeps thinking what kind of person Frederico was, so he decides to check the girl's pulse again, who is breathing by machines. He says that her pulse is getting weaker since the day before. The man can't believe and asks how this kind of thing can happen. Fred says to call the care immediately, and the man ends up calling a doctor there at that exact moment. The doctor approaches Fred and asks why he wants to use the operating room. Our protagonist says that he is a doctor too, and that he needs to treat that patient with extreme urgency. That doctor can't believe and asks him which hospital our protagonist works, and asks if he has their medical license. The man says that his daughter would not survive that night, and it was to do that as fast as possible. However, the doctor warns that he was only following rules. The guy already knew even that the little girl would not be able to survive that long, and tried to tell the gentleman that if it were not for the boss's help, his sister would already be finished. The doctor ends up taking a punch in the face with everything since he was there trying to hinder our own to save the girl's life. He still warns that that guy didn't deserve to be a doctor since he was not worried about the patient's health. And after taking the punch, he flies out of that room and hits the wall with everything. As soon as he gets up, he says that he'll call the police for our protagonist. The doctors who are passing in the corridor ask what that guy would be doing. Soon he calls everyone there to do something. He says that the relatives of that patient were hitting him, and the other doctors start to get irritated with everything. Doctors know guys. I will call it doctor, because I don't know if all of them have a doctorate. And so the chief of the doctors approaches and asks what was happening. However, this guy was already known to our hero, and Fred goes out there giving a hello. The doctors affirm that it was he who was hitting the employees there. And the evil doctor ends up saying that our protagonist was worth nothing, that he was a criminal and troublemaker. However, the chief of the doctors knew Frederico and ends up answering their giving a hello. Fred gets scared for not having gotten angry with him at that moment. So he affirms that he was not there to do studies. In fact, he was in that hospital because he needed to cure a patient. That shameless doctor, he appears again and starts shouting with our main character. Until the chief of the doctors asks what the hell is happening. Frederico says that they need to do an operation on that child and continues asking there if having a license is really important. The chiefs of the doctors stay quiet there that he's a friend of our main character until the trash doctor. He says that our protagonist was a fraudulent and wanted to call the police for him to be arrested. However, the chief of the doctors says to prepare the operating room immediately, and everyone should give the maximum of assistance to Frederico. The doctors get irritated asking what the director was thinking. So they say that the origins of our protagonist are unknown, but that they can't be impulsive and not let him treat the child. And he still continues saying that if to happen, he would take the responsibility for himself. And soon after the operating room gets occupied, all the doctors say that the director is getting crazy until they reached a conclusion that if that gets out of the hospital, everyone would make fun of them. So the director, he leaves the operating room. People ask how the child was. The director says that he had never seen something like that, and that the protagonist's methods were very crazy, but that they made sense. He only wanted to ask something there for the other doctors. He asks about the marks that were on the girl's body and who was it that did that. One of the doctors gets confused and doesn't know what to say. So someone appears there mysteriously holding the guy by the shirt. Who was there was the little girl's father, who started to get very irritated, asking if it was that guy who had done that. I won't even say what it is, guys, but you use your creativity. The doctor ends up taking a punch in the face with everything and falls on the ground completely scared. The child's father is quite irritated. Until the director says that he would be being sent away, the doctor gets up very scared and asks how they could do that with him, that he was actually innocent. The director says that people like this doctor there should be punished, because they hurt the reputation of other doctors. So the guy starts to get euphoric and asks to have another chance and keeps begging him in a humiliating way. He wanted another chance to work there in that hospital. However, the director is quite tough and says for the other guys to take him away from there soon. He starts shouting at everyone. Meanwhile, the child's father asks how his daughter is. The director says that the things that our protagonist did were very absurd, but that they were working. Time passes at that moment, and in less than 1 hour the operating room is turned off. The staff starts to think that our protagonist may have done something wrong, but after the staff enters, our protagonist says that the methods were right. The nurses warn that our protagonist, he is very unique and also talented as hell. Until another character says that Frederico, he is very special, and probably is the most talented among all the doctors. Our hero gets a little embarrassed with so many compliments, until the child's father realized that his daughter finally seemed to be a little better. So our protagonist hands a prescription of medicines there to the little girl's father, and tells her to give the medicines to the daughter, every day. The child's father starts crying a lot and kneels, saying that he would remember our protagonist for the rest of his life. He still says that this is not an exaggeration and that he didn't need all that. The director says for the child's father to take the little girl, and anything could go to the office to ask for help. Frederico says that he will also appear there at any moment if needed. So time passes, and Fred goes to the director's office to have a tea and chat. The director already hands a glass of chamomile tea to our protagonist, and Fred realizes that this tea really was very tasty. However, the director wanted to go straight to the point. The director asks if our protagonist will want to work at the hospital. Fred even chokes with the tea that he was drinking, and so someone was outside the room listening to everything. The woman got a little scared and asked the reason of the director to want a disciple. It was confusing for the director to have a disciple at that moment. Probably it would be very complicated for him to have an apprentice at the level of our main character, but she realizes that this for our protagonist would be a return, and so in his life an opportunity to earn a lot of money. Because of this, Fred says that he already has a master, that he doesn't need another master there of the city. The doctor didn't expect that Frederico would refuse this offer. The woman who was outside asked how it would be possible for him to have refused at that moment, and that maybe his medical techniques are better than those of the professional doctor. Soon after, the director asks why he was denied, when he offered help, and there Frederico could have everything he wanted, status, fame, and even a lot of money. The protagonist tells a little of his story, saying that he is an orphan, and that he was created in the mountains by 12 different masters, and that they were all the masters and relatives of our proton. So according to Frederico, he couldn't take anyone else as his master. If that was it, the director would not force our protagonist to accept what he had offered. But obviously Frederico would call the director Uncle but not master. This ends up leaving him a little surprised. The woman who was outside starts even to get a little angry, but then she unexpectedly starts crying in the scenario of the protagonist. Soon after, it starts to play. It was a message from Jiang, his 7th sister. She was sending a location, and our protagonist decided to ask the director what place that was. The guy says that it was an abandoned place and that it was even a little far. Fred asks if his sister could be in danger, so we see that the cell phone was broken on the floor. The 7th sister was in danger at that exact moment. She asks what those guys who were there wanted to do with her, but the man who had tied up the girl simply says that he did that because he wanted to. He wanted to treat her in the same way that she treated him. They will say some words here, a little heavy, guys, so I'll have to change for other words. He ends up asking if she thinks that he's dumb or something like that. The 7th sister didn't understand what was happening and also already thinks that it is her end. Soon after she's taken to another place at that moment, we go back a little in the past, where she asks where they were going. The driver doesn't answer her, but the place where they were going was full of people wanting in a certain way to do evil. The driver stops the car and the 7th sister realizes everything that was happening. The driver was her assistant. She apologizes because they forced her to do that. It is at that exact moment that the 7th sister realizes that everything there was nothing more than a simple negligence of her. She should have paid attention better previously. The gentleman realized that the broken cell phone would no longer be useful, so they could throw it away, but they would give that 7th sister a proper fun. He takes a syringe in his hand and she keeps begging him to stop. With that, soon he gets completely irritated and gives a horrible smile to her. And so he says that it was not something very big to play at that moment. John gets extremely scared to realize that he has already ended the lives of some people before, so they decide to explain that the place where they are was where the experiments happened, and asks if she remembers the general of the company, and that he went previously. The girl obviously remembered and asked him not to do that kind of thing again. But obviously this guy, he doesn't listen to all that, and says I wanted to play with her. Even so, scared, John keeps begging, telling him to move away, but he says that the older brothers could take care of her at that moment. So with the syringe, he starts to approach the girl, and she gets terrified, until he almost injects it into her neck. But at that exact moment, Frederico approaches and says to stop with that. Now the man gets scared, and he didn't understand how something like that could happen. He looks back asking who would be there. And it was exactly Frederico, who always appears at the last moment, and says to leave the girl alone. He says that while he was holding one of the guards, and we already know that he arrived there causing the greatest terror in the extras, the 7th sister gets happy to know that our protagonist was well and was there to rescue her. Soon after, the guard says that child was very powerful, referring to our hero. This makes that evil man get scared, so he starts calling other guards to help beat our protagonist. But obviously Fredfoot was much stronger, so he advances quite fast. He holds on the neck of that guy with everything and does the same thing with another guy who was on the side, and in a quite simple way, knocks both down on the floor as if it was nothing. The man was getting more and more scared and asks how he did that, and ends up asking Frederico not to get close to him, otherwise something bad would happen. However, Fred says that if he were to approach, he would do something much worse with them. That guy had messed with everything that was most important to our Fred, so he would pay dearly for that. He advances, but the guy tells him not to do that because he was from a very rich family, as if our dear Fred there was going to care about those things. He didn't care at all. He simply gives a punch with everything in that guy, and in this way, the evil man falls with everything on the floor. Frederico doesn't stop there. The guy was very angry and keeps putting his paw on his face. Still asks how he could touch his sister. The man who was already all swollen asks to stop and spare his life, and Fred ends up stopping. At that moment, he looks at the seventh sister, asking if by chance she was well. Jiang says that she was poisoned, and that she would need help from our main character. Soon after, he runs to untie her first and helps the girl to get up. She says that something was injected into her, and she didn't understand very well what that was. However, she knew that she was being poisoned. Fred decides to check Jiang's pulse and understands perfectly what was happening. She ends up being a little surprised by our protagonist managing to do these things. Soon after, Fred says that it will probably hurt a little the process there, to be able to remove the poison from her. She feels a little intense pain, only at that moment someone ends up getting up behind him and takes a gun with his hand, saying that he would end Frederico's life right there. However, Fred looks back extremely irritated. He uses his intense power to attack that guy. The crazy guy's weapon starts to get with a bad function and so ends up falling out of his hand. The guy asks himself, what did Frederico do? And his hands were no longer on his control. Fred says that he did what should have done a little earlier, and now the guy's hands were completely desynchronized with his body. Soon after, he ran away in that place, saying that the guy's family could make that come back to normal. The seventh sister tells Frederico that he was running away, but Fred warns that he has to help at that moment. The crazy guy already looks back smiling, saying that he will manage to escape, but soon he takes a punch in the face with everything, and so he falls on the floor a little confused. Then he looks up to see who was there, and it was the father of that child who was in the hospital union. He was there fallen on the floor, and now he didn't understand what he should do, but Gustavo gets up with everything and starts giving several punches in the face of this shameless guy. The seventh sister, she asks Frederico who that guy was. So Frederico presents Gustavo and says that he is a security guard. He gets very excited to present this guy, and soon the seventh sister asks if it was a disciple of our hero. Scared, he says no, and then Gustavo approaches Juninho, and all hurt in the middle there was another woman, and she ends up falling on the floor too. The seventh sister realizes that that was her private driver, and takes the opportunity to say that she was forced to do all that. She said that she didn't want to do it, but she ended up doing it because she was afraid, and still they keep begging for forgiveness. However, Jiang asks why she did that, and if she didn't trust the seventh sister, that she could be able to protect her. The driver bar assistant, she decides to tell the whole truth, and she said that she would be helped if she betrayed the seventh sister, and that they also promised her that they would not hurt Jiang. They would only kidnap her, and ask for an amount of money in return. Juninho, he gets up and talks with that woman there. Obviously she was blind and naive, and that they did that obviously to hurt everyone. The driver gets confused and asks why he was doing that with Jiang. In fact, they were doing that because Juninho says that he thought that everyone were traitors. The driver gets up saying that she would avenge her sister, so everyone starts to hit him and Juninho without stopping. Frederico, he ends up thanking Gustavo for everything that he did at that moment, until a day passes, and someone ends up receiving a newspaper. It was the chief of the Zhang family, and he asks what happened in the newspaper at that time. So the guy hands the newspaper, which was the eldest son of the family, and says that they can't protect that guy. The chief of the family then gets up completely irritated, saying to find the person who would be hurting his brothers, and to make that person pay for everything that he did. So the eldest son hands a photo of a cut hand and says that he managed to cut the meridians. The chief asks how that guy managed to do that, but it was time to stop with all this and find who was messing with the Zhang family. The eldest son says that he would do everything to find this so-called Frederico, but that would be a little complicated at the moment. So soon the chief of the family asked to warn everyone. The news was that the eldest son would be there to help everyone in the martial arts. The chief of the family, he starts to leave completely irritated. The staff is quite loose guys. They want to do evil with everyone. But when someone responds to the height, they get all pistolinas. The crazy guy already looks straight at the window, saying that he wanted to fight against everyone who fought against his family. So he asks to separate a staff there to search for Frederico. The scene passes, and we see the scene of a quite elegant place. A huge house where the owner was received Diana. She was there accompanied by our hero at that unusual moment. Fred, he comments that this was the right address that he had received there on his cell phone, and they had also arrived at the exact time. However, someone ends up calling attention to Frederico, and he gets completely scared. Soon after, the guards ask him to put his face there to do the facial recognition. Fred only answers that he was there because he knew someone, but it is that he should do the facial recognition first. But he was not understanding what that was. He asks if this will cause some problems there for his meridians, and Diana soon realizes that our protagonist really was a complete madman who didn't know anything about technology. The guards tell him to leave soon from there. If he doesn't manage to do this facial recognition, he should bark out, but someone approaches saying to let them enter. The guards get confused with who could have appeared, and it was exactly the seventh sister, Jiang, who was there. He was a little scared and said that everything was fine, trying to give a disguise. Soon they run quickly to release the gates. Diana talks about the protagonist's seventh sister, and comment a little there about her being very beautiful. The seventh sister asks Diana if she's the one who will share the room there with her. The girl gets a little embarrassed and confused to answer this question until Jiang realizes that the psyche of that woman was not so interesting. So she starts to approach and soon after holds Diana's hand thanking. She also says that she was welcome in that place, could feel at home. Diana continued confused and didn't know what to do at that moment. Our protagonist gets a little embarrassed with the cheeks flushed, and soon they proceed entering the house. You already know what they're gonna do, right guys? It is the so-called double cultivation. So the seventh sister and Diana say that they need to do that to Jung. She comments that she is also being forced, but she holds on Diana's face saying that they would proceed to the first step. The seventh sister approaches closer and closer to the face of our little Diana, and the girl ends up trying to accept that in the best way possible. Well, our protagonist, he says that he was going to leave the room at that moment, since it was being a little embarrassing. I am absolutely sure that you would stay inside the room to watch everything, and in this way the girls end up kissing. Frederico stays there outside thinking about the things that could be happening. The guy was a true shameless. He even keeps commenting that he will do everything to resist the pressure and not give a peek. Because of this, he decides to train a little to try to think of something else. And so in the middle of his meditation, he realizes that something was happening. Someone had appeared in front of him while a sword was flying in his direction, and it was precisely Alice. Perhaps this may be just a false illusion, and not a representation of the future. The seventh sister, she leaves the room saying that they finished with the cultivation and that now she would take a bath and then sleep to rest. Fred kept thinking about the things that had happened in that room, and so Diana decides that she would also take a bath together. Frederico gets crazy there, trying to understand if he heard correctly. A little later they will eat, and Diana says that it was very fun in our main character. And he even gets a little jealous guys, saying that they are very close, and that they are very friendly for his taste. Diana says that he doesn't understand that this is a woman thing, and Fred ends up trying to accept all that. At that moment, someone ends up calling him. As soon as he answers, someone says on the other side of the line that he needed to talk urgently with our hero. The protagonist warns that he was eating and could not be now, but the person says that it was about the Zhang family, and this would cause problems for our main character. Fred decided to run to the place where Tuk-Tu was mentioned, and so he stays looking around to find someone. Alice was there and decided to call his attention soon. Our protagonist asks what happened. The girl questions if it was he who was solving the situations with the member of the Zhang family, and Fred remembers the incident that was happening. She says that something was recorded there that was shown to the chief of their family. The crazy guys there cause a confusion and then get pistols wanting to charge the justice of others. I tell you, these guys there are very loose. The protagonist says that a revenge would probably happen, and Alice explains that that was not something so simple, since their family was complicated and powerful, and that actually a widespread fight between the families could happen. Alice continues explaining that that could cause problems for many people. However, Frederico says that they're masters in martial arts and everything would be fine, and that even he would be able to resolve the matter. However, someone ends up entering in the middle of the conversation. Frederico and Alice ask themselves, who could it be? And here he was, the guardian of the Zhang family, Rodolfo. Alice knew Rodolfo once he already went to the banquet of the families. He was very clever and powerful, and was also known as one of the people who destroyed the Black Organization. Soon the protagonist asks if he was there to do a revenge of the family. Rodolfo asks what else he would do, so he starts using his aura, and also his power. He advances to give a punch with everything on them, saying that our protagonist hurt one of his brothers. However, Frederico would not let this so simple, and ends up holding his punch as if it was nothing. Rodolfo continued saying that it was very strange our protagonist having so much power like that, and it advances to try to give another punch in the face of our hero. At that exact moment, the protagonist managed to dodge the punch, and so Fred explains that everything would end there, right there. He didn't have time to lose with this Zhang family. Rodolfo is not going to let things so simple like that. So he advances again, and this ends up making our protagonist defend the attack and counter-attacking with everything there. Alice didn't understand what she should do at that moment. She was just watching the fight happening before her eyes and ends up getting quite nervous. She decides to ask if she could help our protagonist in some way, but obviously seeing that intense fight, she would not be able to do anything that could be useful. The two advance on top of each other without thinking twice, and Fred ends up defending the attacks. Soon after he advances on top again, however, Rodolfo he ends up defending. The fight was quite fierce, and our protagonist ends up being thrown far away. Rodolfo realizes that that kid, he has a very intense force. And our main character, he realizes that his arm also was not very well. And if Rodolfo wanted to really start a fight, he should take that even more seriously, otherwise he would lose. Rodolfo stays making an evil face there, and so he undoes his pose, saying that that was all for today, and that in the future they would meet again Alice. She asks if he would do something bad again, and Frederico realizes that this guy only came there to test his strength. The guy asks if our protagonist was hiding some kind of card there up his sleeve, and obviously our protagonist had not demonstrated all his power, and he makes this very clear for this guy Alice. She doesn't understand very well what our protagonist was talking about, only that her cell phone ends up ringing and it was someone sending a message for him. It was Gustavo, and he says that his daughter had already woken up, so he decided to show a photo, and both get very happy at that moment. He says that the protagonist's arts are very good, and that they saved the life of his little daughter. Only that in the middle there of the live call, someone ends up entering and trying to take the little girl Fred. Seeing that scene, he gets extremely irritated, and soon after another video is sent for him. He decided to open that video soon after, and it was the eldest brother of the Zhang family. This there was the Boladao guy, and his name was Carlos. He tells Frederico that he has 3 more days to appear at their house on the mountain. The protagonist realizes that something was very strange, and Alice says that the mountain was very distant from the city. However, our hero, he would not let that his friend and his little daughter were caught like that. Alice tells our protagonist to ask for help for her grandfather, since her family was also quite powerful, and could help. However, Fred, he was not going to accept this so easily. Obviously, she says that her grandfather could do everything for the family, and so our protagonist realizes that Alice could become his disciple in the future. So he takes advantage of this moment to accept her help. And so we go until the Yu family. Our protagonist realizes that inside everything seemed to be an imperial palace. Her grandfather ends up approaching and asks what are the problems that our hero had caused, and that everything that he did was nothing simple. He sits next to the protagonist and says that they could not do much to help him. The Zheng family was very strong. Besides everything, it was very cruel. If the protagonist moved against this family, he was probably causing the end of his own life. Fred asks if they were so powerful like that for everyone to feel afraid of them. So he thinks that he should meditate a little on the conditions. The grandfather there says that there was not much that he could do against the Zheng family, and that from now on he should demonstrate all the achievements that he did. Frederico, he stays trying to convince the girl's grandfather, saying that he has already saved his granddaughter several times. The grandfather, he had already recognized all this kind of thing, but he says there that he could not even help our main character, since it would be very difficult. The girl asks how he could do this kind of thing, but Frederico thanks for all the kindness of the grandfather and for letting all this kind of thing pass. Basically, our protagonist was causing problems there for the Yu family, kind of unintentionally, right guys? He was only giving a lesson in these loose guys, and ended up generating a war between the families. Alice, she doesn't understand very well what Frederico was talking about, but soon after they leave, and she thinks that her grandfather's plan was very good. It was not told there for us what they had planned, but they had a card up their sleeve. Soon she says that the family would be providing the support for Fred, and he realized all this, and was thanking. However, there was more things that he could do at that exact moment. At that time, he thinks a lot about the operation, and realizes that Alice was a key figure. Soon she tells our protagonist, really, that he has a very open mind, and wanted to send him to that place first. So they stop in front of the intense gate. There was our protagonist's exit, so he gives a goodbye to Alice. Was starting the rescue mission of Gustavo and his little daughter, and also the mission to fix this Zhang family of Luce of Hell. At the time of saying goodbye, she ends up saying something very low, and he can't understand very well. Soon after, he says that people don't trust her very much, but that he believes in the girl 100%, and ends up thanking for all the help that she has given, so he leaves that place. Alice, she asks herself what is wrong with her, so she gives 2 slaps on her face, saying that she has never really found someone who had so much interest in her as he has. Alice was in love, guys. Our protagonist had gone to the mountain house of that rival family. There they were playing cards and making bets. So the eldest son, and Carlos, he introduces himself and tells everyone to open the door as fast as possible. The guards, they approach to open the doors, so he enters cautiously. While in the room, there was someone handcuffed. It was Gustavo, who was there not understanding what was happening. Soon the guy stayed ordering for Gustavo to wake up and still ends up throwing a bucket of cold water on him. The guy asks if he was well. Of course I am well. Yes, I was kidnapped, beaten, and I am well. Gustavo gets angry and shouts for Carlos that he should end his life, but he was also worried about his little daughter and asks where she was. However, Carlos, he simply doesn't answer anything and stays mocking there of the father. He says that Gustavo was a dog and that he should not stay barking. Carlos reveals that the little girl now is part of the Zhang family, and that it will be much better to stay with them, and ends up taking the cell phone and shows something to the father. His daughter was guarded together with 2 wolves, completely fierce. Gustavo already gets completely irritated to see that his daughter was in danger. I tell you that this family Zange there is worth nothing, guys. The chain that was holding Gustavo was almost breaking of how furious the guy was like that. The guy decides that it was time to give him an injection. 2 injections fly in Gustavo's chest, and the guy starts to lose consciousness until he almost falls on the floor. It is like this, Carlos decided to take the cell phone and realizes that our protagonist was arriving at the place. He asked the guards to receive the protagonist very well, and Gustavo had listened to this, so he ends up thinking about our protagonist a little, since he would be there to rescue him. Our protagonist sees that his friend was there hurt, and ends up shouting the name of that shameless Carlos. He warns that he arrived at the place as requested, and soon after all the guards try to advance on top of our hero. Everyone runs to try to catch our main character because they had been ordered to do that. However, Frederico, he was not going to let this so simple, so he goes soon and holds on the shoulder of one of them, and so he runs to near another. Quickly, he manages to eliminate several guards, and Carlos, who was in the room only waiting for the whole situation, he's received by a guard who warns everything. The chief of the family was there too, and says that they need to end our protagonist as fast as possible. But another one of them says that it was not necessary to do all this, and that there was a test for our protagonist outside the house. Fred was finishing with everyone of a single time, and so he starts to walk forward completely. The crazy guy was 2 good guys. He could take their more or less 5,000 soldier that would not be able to defeat our dear protagonist. The staff even starts to get out of the front. They were dying of fear of the boy. And Fred, he had something to solve in that place, and he remembers very well the face of the person who was the chief of the Zhang family. Because of this, he prepares his punch to break with the whole wall. And after hitting that concrete wall, everyone starts to get scared. The people who are on the other side even run with fear. And after knocking down that wall, Federico prepares, saying that now everything would start there. And he soon prepares to leave running after the crazy guys. However, other guards appear in front of our protagonist saying that they will end with him. Scared they didn't understand very well what they should do at that moment. But Federico says that he would talk with the chief of the family as early as possible. The chief of the guard says that that territory was known by boxing, and that all of them would give a beating in our main character. I doubt it very much, but alright, right? The chief also warns that Federico, he is a little arrogant. But Fred didn't have much time to talk. In fact, he was very irritated so quickly he moves in front of the chief of the guards, and so he prepares giving a punch with everything in the face of the chief and asks if the others are prepared to take a beating too. However, they were more than prepared, and so all advance on top of our main character. Federico ends up putting the headphones to receive a call, and so he says besides the call that he arrived at the combined place Alice and the staff, who were on the other side of the line. They were prepared to enter into combat. When our protagonist gave the signal as everything was going, according to the plan, he decides to warn Alice that everything was fine. This was the plan that Mr. Yu had planned with Fred. It is clear that the Yu family was not going to let be offended like that, and let these guys there get away unpunished. So she warns the other guards to advance all together. Meanwhile, in another place inside the house, there was Alice's grandfather who was completely nervous. He didn't even understand why she wanted so much to go to that place together with Federico. So we go back a little in time when she had prepared and told the real reason. The grandfather, he gets worried about her going to such a dangerous place like that, but she looks carefully at her grandfather. She didn't know how to explain if it was because of Fred or not. In fact, she was super in love, but she didn't want to admit. Soon we go back to the real time where someone had approached to talk with her grandfather. The grandfather asked the guard what he was thinking of all this plan. The guard says that it is important for the family to do everything possible to help Federico, and the grandfather keeps asking if this guy really thinks that, if by chance they should help Federico or not. It is clear that he had to help right guys. Our main character, he only got involved in this mess there trying to help Alice. Soon after, the guard asks about who should marry his granddaughter. The grandfather says that he doesn't know how he would proceed with this marriage matter, but doing a battle with the other family was too complicated and would only worsen things. The grandfather says that the situation would not be resolved so easily, and soon we go back to the scene with our protagonist who is hitting everyone. He lifts one of the guards and asks where the hostage was, but the guard didn't know, so our protagonist throws him to the ground with everything, and he keeps thinking where would the family hide the hostages? He was quite worried about the little girl and her father, so he decides to break another door to enter the place. But after he tries to touch the door, he realizes that it was already open. It is like this. He ends up opening one of them and is well received by people who were with shields, batons, weapons, everything pointed to his direction. Very receptive, these people. The eldest son of the Zan family, and he was soon behind saying that it was good to meet our protagonist in a place like that. He still says that our protagonist is very courageous for having gone there with empty hands. Irritated Fred ends up holding his own fist, and he calls Carlos by the name, saying that he was completely irritated with him and still says that the guy is a coward. Carlos in turn knew that he was irritating our main character, so he starts to laugh a little. At that moment, the guy says that it was to end our hero's life, and that it was cool to see all that from that angle very close. So the guards prepare to start shooting one after the other. This story is amazing, so if you want me to bring part 3, leave a like and a comment. Let's set a goal of 100 to send up your comments, so make sure to comment a lot. I'll also recommend this work that's about to pop up on the screen. It's a great recap, and I'm sure you'll love it. See you next time, guys. But Fred, he managed to do somersaults and dodge all the shots. Soon after, he looks back to verify what was happening. He had fled a little and apologized for his masters, since a warrior should never flee from a combat. At that moment, he breathes deeply, trying to channel his energy. So he continues dodging all the attacks. Federico prepares to do one of his plans, and so he starts to hit his powers on all the guards who are armed. And he does this with his needles one after the other. He starts to take out, and the staff goes falling on the floor, until proceeding with this they ask what the hell was happening. The guy's arm was horrible, and the body was not responding right. Everything thanks to those magic needles. After some fall, they realized that their arms were not working. It was as if our protagonist had turned off the neural connection between the arms and the brains. Carlos, he gets scared. He starts to say that it was to end the protagonist as fast as possible. The guy was already starting to get worried, guys. And if you like Federico making some little villains there die of fear, already leave a like and a comment there asking for the next part. He looks to the side, saying for the others to enter the battlefield. The ones who are in reserve start to prepare to enter there in the field, and our protagonist realizes all this. So they start to arrive one by one, and our protagonist gets cornered. Soon after, everyone prepares their weapons and start to give several shots. For the power of our main character, that was too insane, and the bullets were flying all in his direction. However, for some reason, our protagonist managed to change the direction of the bullets. Guys, here it is already turning Matrix, and he makes all those soldiers be hit. For who thought that our protagonist only had the power Zinyo of the needle was very mistaken. Federico. He was behind the door only watching everything. While the guards, they start to fall one after the other without stopping course, he gets extremely scared, and with the pants blurred. He didn't know what he would do now, so he asked for everyone to withdraw from that place as fast as possible. However, our protagonist was already behind them asking where they think they were going course. He didn't understand why Federico was so fast like that, and it seemed that he always had a card up his sleeve. But soon he held a little of his needles and demonstrated all this for them. He throws the needles one after the other, and that guy there, Carlos, he starts to get completely scared. However, the woman who was his assistant, she takes a little knife and manages to dodge all the needles. That guy was very chicken, guys. And the woman stays, telling her master to leave, that she will buy time. Carlos, he puts the foot and leaves running, saying that he would leave everything in the hands of his assistant. Frederico realized that that girl was quite skilled, so she tells our hero not to stay so full of himself because she herself would fix him. She says this and still says that today will be the end of his life. After she tells this joke, someone ends up hitting the door with everything. Alice entered with her guards and asked herself where the staff should be. Soon one of the guards ends up feeling that a fight was very close there to them, and Alice gets scared with what was being there existed a child who was caged. Guys, it was like Gustavo's little daughter, and that scene ended up scaring Alice quite a lot. She got a little traumatized that they should proceed to save that child, and Alice, so she runs to save the little girl. As soon as she arrives, she holds the girl. The poor little thing was completely scared and didn't know what to do. However, Alice, she says that it was not necessary to stay in shock that way, and the child starts to cry. So she runs with the little child in her hands, and the chief of the family realizes that there exists a strange movement in the place, and he orders here the staff should take care of that. The swordsman master of the family says that they have a very high opponent in the middle of the field, until someone arrives in the room completely scared. At that moment it was Carlos, and he didn't understand what was happening, but he tells his father that they lost in that part of the garden there from the front, and they took a beating. Rita, the chief of the family, asks him to calm down and explains everything right. Soon they warn that there is no way to stop Frederico. Meanwhile, Alice was running faster than she could. A swordswoman was approaching, saying that she would stop. At that moment, the guards point all their weapons at that guy, and as many people appear, it was a lot of extra money that he would earn. The guy was a mercenary. The guards ask who that guy was, while some were already shooting, but the gentleman, he was not even caring, and holds his eyes, and so his sword ends up crossing the people. The guards take advantage to the shoot at the same time, but at that moment his shadow ends up disappearing and appears in front of Alice, asking where she was going. The gentleman ends up laughing at that situation, and soon he appears again behind her. The girl looks back confused with what could be happening, and so we go inside a house. It was the seventh sister who was worried about all that. Soon Diana, she appears there in the room, and the seventh sister asks how she was there. Diana gets confused and asks if she was waiting for someone. After that, she says that our protagonist agreed to save her because of this. He's fighting against the Jang family. In this meantime, she got very worried about our main character, since he would be facing a family that was extremely powerful. Diana. She approaches and puts a jacket on her shoulder, saying that it will be alright. I saw that there was a staff who didn't like very much the climate between the two. I am already from the team that found it a little cool. So comment there, what are you thinking? You shipped the seventh sister with Diana, the seventh sister Jang. She thanks, saying that she was still worried, but at that moment they didn't know for sure what to do, and soon after she looks to the sky, asking for our protagonist to come back and invites. She says that when she was younger, she taught our protagonist some techniques in the mountains when they were little, had some techniques that were the first that they learned, and because of this she managed to become one of the seven sisters. However, at that moment she got very worried about Fred, and mainly by the fact of her not managing to use abilities to help him in some way. For who didn't understand, she is sick, guys, so she can't use her cultivation skills. That's why she seems a little weak. But actually it is that she is sick, really. Among all the sisters, she is the most unlucky, the seventh sister. She got a quite rare disease, of which makes it impossible for her to use her powers, and also consumes part of her life. Whenever she tried to use her skills, something horrible happened and she felt very bad. However, that horrible family was taking everything that was hers, and Diana realized that a red liquid was coming out of Jang. She explains that our protagonist, he left the mountain and came to her to help her, but if something happens with him, she will blame herself for the rest of her life. At that moment, someone appears asking what would happen. This was the sixth sister, guys. Julia, and this here is one of my favorites, guys. Seventh sister got confused, but she was happy because Julia was there. Julia asked what she was thinking of doing at that moment, and it seemed that Jang would use her remaining energy to help our main character. And finally she would end up, let's say, disliving. And she explains this, saying that she would use the rest of her energy to help Frederico. Julia, so she ends up moving away a little and still says that they are not connecting with each other. Diana, she was not understanding anything, guys, and asks who was that girl who simply appeared there in the room. The seventh sister only looks at her without explaining the situation right. Soon after she continues talking with Julia, that it was her mistake for not having done so much connection like that, and soon Julia says that she cares a lot about the family and that's why she appeared there. She didn't like the situation, Tyver the seventh sister begging there for the people to save the little brother, but even so, Jiang, she kneels on the floor and begs for the sixth sister to help Fred. Everyone gets surprised with this scene, and the seventh sister, she continues asking for Julia to save the protagonist as soon as possible. The sixth sister, she stays quiet at that moment, and her shadow starts to disappear at that time. Jiang, she didn't understand very well what was being done, and Julia had teleported, saying that she will get the protagonist back first, and then she will talk about other more important matters. Soon after she teleports again. Diana smiles, saying that our protagonist's family is quite complicated. However, soon the seventh sister starts to get very bad. Diana, she doesn't understand right what was happening, but she knew that Jiang's health there was getting complicated. Jiangxi still says that everything was fine, even so, and that it was time to continue what they were doing. The scene goes back to Frederico's fight, who is watching all that. The woman asks to let her leave, and our protagonist says that he will give 3 hours for her to leave that place. Meanwhile, he goes to the next gate because it was time to do the decisive battle. Gustavo and his daughter should wait for the protagonist at that moment while he enters through the gate. When he entered, 2 people were in the front waiting for him, and they say that they recognized each other again. Soon our protagonist asks where his friends are. Rodolfo answers that he will only let him discover by himself. The shameless guy starts to make fun of our main character, so the 2 end up advancing one on top of the other, our main character. He ends up dodging the blows, and when Rodolfo tries to attack, he watches that blow perfectly. And so another person who was there on the side says that he would not let get away so cheap. But anyway, our protagonist, he defends from the 2 attacks. The battle starts to get more and more intense, and our protagonist realizes that if he lets Rodolfo and this other guy attack at the same time, it'll be too complicated. So our main character, he advances on top of Rodolfo, trying to end with him first, however. Arthur, who is the other crazy guy there, he was not going to let this so easy, and advances soon after, on top of the main character. Because of the situation, Frederico, he should defend the 2 attacks, and it is the same that he does. At the same time, he throws 2 needles in the direction of one of the people, and that ends up paralyzing Arthur for a time. So he could focus his fight against Rodolfo. In this way, he advances, saying that this will be a fight that he will take seriously. The crazy guy had not taken any fight seriously yet, guys. He had already beaten everyone, this shameless scoundrel. Arthur, he was recovering all his consciousness, while his friend Rodolfo, he advanced on top of our hero. He advances without pain and without mercy, and when watching Fred in that way, he starts to laugh. However, at that moment, someone ends up stopping their fight. It was the swordsman who had captured Alice, and he wanted to use that against our main character, doing there a certain blackmail. Because of this, Frederico shouted for Alice's name. Only that the girl, she apologizes for not having held that man and having been captured. Fred tells her not to worry and that she was very useful. Soon Swordsman asks for everyone to watch that scene, and so he holds his sword while throwing little girl on top of Rodolfo. The guy holds the child, and soon our protagonist gets irritated and asks to release at that time. At that same instant, however, Swordsman, he advances with everything on top of the protagonist, and he dodges one of his attacks, but another ends up exploding right next to him. He realized that that man was no joke, guys. He was quite powerful, and the staff there even starts to get scared, because the guy really was very strong. His sword was powerful and moved quickly. Our protagonist ends up saying for them to advance one on top of the other as fast as possible, and so our protagonist's fist collides with the tip of the sword, throwing them back, and after this, people start to get scared and get shocked, but our protagonist's red eyes end up scaring the staff even more. The Pattison advances, saying that he would end our main character's life, so they end up fighting one against the other in a quite fast way, and Frederico advances without stopping. He realizes that those swordsmen had something quite intense, so he puts his hand on his own chest and ends up using his power. The swordsman says that it was useless for him to do all that to try to protect himself, but he didn't understand. Our protagonist held his sword without thinking twice, as if it was something easy, and the as that an explosion ended up happening because of this Alice. She didn't know right what she should do, but when seeing that our protagonist held his sword, everyone there starts to shout as saying that that was something impossible. Fred, he was quite serious and held the sword in a quite simple way. Rodolfo, he got scared without understanding anything. So he decides to advance together with Arthur on top of our main character. And when realizing that he was being surrounded by the people Frederico, he ended up getting impatient. He kneeled on the floor and used his impulse to jump quite high, and so he approaches Alice, who at that moment was quite scared. Rodolfo, he didn't stop and tried to attack our protagonist with everything again. But before he could do that, Fred hit the swordsman and used his leg to kick the others. However, something had hit our protagonist right on his shoulder. There he asked him to stop with this and look to his side. There was a person who was with a machine gun shooting at them. Carlos was there on the side saying that it was well done. Frederico, obviously, he got scared and said that that was not possible. He didn't believe that the staff there was so cowardly like that. But still, the swordsman, he took advantage of this moment to attack our protagonist in the sly. Carlos said that it was of great help at that moment, and so another shot is given in the direction of our hero. He managed to dodge sometimes, but soon this stops letting him advance, and attack our hero, taking advantage that he was busy. And at that time, something terrible happens. Alice leaves the child on the floor and advances on top of our hero. It is to try to defend him, she tries to sacrifice herself for him. Guys, look what love doesn't do. Our protagonist didn't understand very well how that could have happened, and he ended up shouting her name. However, the swordsman advanced on top of Alice to hit her with everything, but she would not let these things happen with our hero. So the swordsman advanced with a punch, and Frederico was not going to let this happen again, and tried to counterattack. Fred's punch, he ended up hitting right on the forehead of that crazy guy, who ended up making a hole directly in his skull. So our protagonist approaches to try to catch Alice and proceed. The shots were given in direction to them. However, Fred leaves running Alice. She got scared and didn't know right what was happening. She was a little dazed, but our protagonist, he says that he will end Carlos's life and that he would never forgive him. Only that arrogant guy says that he would only do this in the next life. Our protagonist held himself to protect Alice, but at that moment someone ended up hitting the guards who were giving shots in our main character. And for the second time she hits directly the guys. An explosion of power happens, and that was the sixth sister. Julia, a helicopter also appeared. And Carlos, he didn't know what he would do at that time. The guy realized that he was screwed. Julia, she was prepared to end their lives, and soon Carlos asks who was that girl who appeared there mysteriously. The girl asks our hero if he is Frederico, and ends up explaining that she is the sixth sister. The helicopter starts to descend, and she says that that was a favor that she was doing for the seventh sister. He ended up realizing that it was his sister, and he got quite excited. So he looks back smiling, and she asks if he really is a genius. Soon after, Carlos thinks of ending the life of that girl and makes a signal for the guards who are preparing to get the weapons. However, she steps with everything on the floor and uses her power to throw one of the tiles with everything in one of the guards, which ends up hitting directly on his back. And still, she asks not to play with that kind of thing, and so gives a kick with everything in Carlos. Our protagonist takes advantage of this opportune moment to try to help Alice. And looks from the front to her, saying that the girl is a little kind of silly, and says that she left the child there because it would be safe. She was trying to explain herself, guys, but our protagonist says for her to stop talking. Otherwise, she would lose consciousness. Because of this, he tries to save her using his special medicine. The cut didn't hit any vital area, so she was not at risk of life. And after having done the traditional Chinese medicine, he asks her to rest. Our protagonist jumps with everything on the roof and goes in direction to that shameless Carlos, and still says that all that could end. At that exact moment, Carlos, without knowing what to do, he starts to get afflicted, and soon our protagonist asks how Carlos wants to lose his life. Only that scared the gentleman asked to spare his life. He didn't deserve to die. This guy there deserved to take a beating until forgetting how he did to stand up. Our protagonist says that this is not possible, and ends up giving a kick with everything in his stomach. The sixth sister passes next to our protagonist, asking what he will do with the Zhang family. He gives the command to destroy all the evil. And so the scene cuts to 2 days later, and in the newspapers only appeared the collapse of the Zhang family. Alice, she was in the hospital talking with Fred, saying that she has already listened to everything. Our protagonist peeling an apple. He ends up thanking the girl's grandfather. She says that it was not necessary to do all that, but she ends up eating the apple, saying that everything was already fine at that time. However, the protagonist, he would not accept all this, and says that he needs to regularize her body because the girl's meridians were destabilized. She asks if he is so worried like that about her. And Frederico says that obviously he is very worried since the girl was very important for him. This ends up leaving Alice a little embarrassed, guys, and she gets with the cheeks flushed. However, the protagonist warns that what he will say now is very important and that he hopes that she will not refuse. Maybe it was what she so much dreamed, guys. He was already thinking that he would ask her to enter in dating, so she even ends up saying that it depends a lot on what he will say. The poor girl thought even that maybe it was a confession. However, Fred says that he wants to have her as disciple. And this ends up leaving her a little confused and even a little frustrated. And because of this, she starts to throw several things in him, telling the boy to leave the room as fast as possible. But he says that he was completely serious, and so she throws a pillow with everything on his face while he leaves the room. The sixth sister was there, saying that he can't do this. Our protagonist takes advantage to ask what happened with the seventh sister, since she was not very well of health. Obviously, Julia, she didn't know how to explain what had happened, but she was trying to ask for help for the sixth sister. But she was with a lot of anger and anxiety. According to Julia, the seventh sister has always been a little weak and continued saying that maybe now it is the time for Jiang to give up and end soon with her life. This ends up leaving our protagonist scared. He didn't know right what she was wanting to say with these words. Diana. She was very worried about the seventh sister. Because of this, she was crying, trying to understand why our protagonist was taking so long. But the seventh sister, Jiang, she says that she will not lose for a little sick like that. Actually, our protagonist and Julia ends up approaching there, surprising them. Julia gives a hello for Jiang, and our protagonist starts to run, quite worried with the help of Diana, the seventh sister. She gets up a little and says that they are worried in vain, and that she was well. Only that Julia, she goes there and said that it would be better if everything ended faster. Fred takes advantage to give a good look at her pulse. This makes them get even more worried because it was not supposed to be anything much. Meanwhile, Fred says for the girl to calm down, otherwise her pulse will get disordered. With this, Frederico, he realizes that it was a small heart attack together with a loss of consciousness. With this, he knows that the disease is nothing simple, and it is something quite dangerous, so he decides to ask if it makes much time that this sensation in the girl had started. Meanwhile, Julia, the sixth sister, she only watched there in the corner. Diana says that the seventh sister did all this for our protagonist. However, Jiang, she didn't want that Diana stay telling there for Frederico the reason of her situation having worsened. Frederico says that he doesn't know what was the cause. It was at that moment that Julia approached, saying that it was because of Jiang having kneeled asking for her to save Frederico. This leaves Fred irritated, and he asks the reason of this having happened, and says that it was not necessary for her to have kneeled. Julia explains that she was worried of our protagonist ending up losing his life there for the Zhang family, and this ended up leaving him very sad for her, having kneeled only because of him. However, our protagonist kept thinking about the reason of Julia having appeared at that time to save him. So he starts to get up, saying that he already has the plan for the treatment. He decides to ask Jung if it was necessary to abandon dignity because of him, and the seventh sister says that it was not that kind of thing that she was thinking when she kneeled. So she decided to say that when she met our main character, he was still quite little. She held the little Fred in her arms, and possibly he would not remember anything of this. The masters were there talking about Frederico's destiny, and asked for the seventh sister to take responsibility for him. Obviously, without thinking twice, she accepts and decides to take care of our main character. So simply she says that she is the eldest sister of our protagonist and that she decided to save him, and that's why our protagonist's life was total responsibility of her. But even so, our hero, he got upset. He didn't understand why all this had been done, but he realized that his sister was there for him, so he tried as much as possible to control his own emotions. Our protagonist asks for everyone to leave the room because he will cure the seventh sister. They ask themselves what kind of treatment our protagonist will do, but it is that he was needing force for this. And Jiang, she already stays thinking nonsense, guys. It even seems that she doesn't know our main character, Frederico. He doesn't stay rolling very much and says that he will help the girl to take off the clothes, but she says that she manages to do this alone, and little by little she starts to throw. She was completely embarrassed because of this situation. And Frederico too. This scoundrel stays with the cheeks flushed. The two others were outside without any expression until Diana hands water for Julia. The sixth sister decided to ask what kind of relationship she has with our protagonist, and the girl says that it is only friendship, but we know that if it depended on her, she would already be dating Frederico. So Julia decides to ask if she is of our protagonist's constitution. And she still asks herself what kind of thing could be happening there inside, because it didn't make sense. Our protagonist is taking so long, so in the water she was seeing the destiny of her brother, and so they listen to a noise coming there from the room. They already think that a nonsense is happening, guys, and leave running there to stay attentive about what was happening. They hit the door with everything asking what they were doing there inside, and so they see our protagonist putting some needles in the seventh sister. But they don't understand right what was rolling there, and soon they leave. Quite embarrassed, the seventh sister apologizes for having shouted, but Frederico, he realizes that that was very normal, in fact, since some needles were fincando there in her skin, right? The protagonist says that there is something that he still hadn't understood, so he decides to ask his sister why she had kneeled for Julia. But the girl simply answers that it is a long story, but makes our protagonist stop. He wanted to know if Julia had an immense power in the martial arts, and that's why his sister had kneeled there before her. Yang says that she trained every day to reach the highest levels of cultivation, and that ended up helping her to become the strongest sister among the seven sisters. She even managed to fight against the masters, of equal for equal, and the golden aura that she had around herself was quite intense, and that made everyone have a certain respect for her. However, there was a day that she realized that she was advancing her own level. This ended up making her fall, with everything on the floor losing consciousness. She was not managing to support the size of power that she had reached. From that day on, she decided that she would train more and more, however this ended up causing even more problems for the sixth sister, and our protagonist decides to ask what kind of problems and consequences were these, and Jiangge says that she didn't care for any consequence. She only wanted to get stronger and stronger. Our protagonist, he gets determined to try to help in some way, even not knowing what consequences were these. So he decides to send one more needle, which was the last there, in Jiang. He also told his sister that he wanted to reverse her situation. The girl gets excited, asking if this was true. So our protagonist leaves the room, and Diana, she already asks if by chance the seventh sister had improved. Frederico says that she needs to rest a lot now, and he decides to ask Julia if he can see her pulse. Without understanding there what was the real reason, she ends up getting a little curious, but it is that he had listened something horrible about the constitution of the two and wanted to try to help Julia. He was not content in saving only the seventh sister, he also wanted to save his other sister, the sixth. And for who is asking it in the comments, no guys, Frederico is not blood brother of them, it is an only brother of consideration since he is orphan and was left there in the mountains. Julia, she asks if it is possible to do this right, cure her situation. And our protagonist says that for sure he can cure her. So he holds in the girl's hands Diana. She stays in the background watching all that situation. An intense glow starts to pass through them. That was the power of our protagonist circulating in Julia's body, trying to analyze her situation. He was trying to understand what he had to do at that exact moment, and what was the bad consequences that she ended up catching for having trained too much for him. Those things didn't make much sense. He had never seen a disease equal to hers. Julia's and Jiang's energy were quite similar. This made him open his eyes carefully. So he managed to find the key point of her energy, which was like the one of a dragon. This makes Julia start to feel an intense pain, and our protagonist realizes everything that was happening. Julia asks why she is feeling this strange pain, and our protagonist says that Julia understood wrong. The seventh sister Julia's power core was broken, and she could not do the cultivation for many years. Because of this, Julia decided to ask what would be happening and how she would heal. So our protagonist warns that someone had played a curse on her. Julia doesn't understand anything, because she can't imagine who could put a curse on her. Frederico also didn't understand why this kind of thing is happening with her, and this ended up scaring Julia even more. Actually, it was a very strong curse, of which our protagonist had never seen. You will see that each sister has a BO for our protagonist to solve, guys. Frederico doesn't have a second apiece. If she doesn't solve this as soon as possible, it could end her life. Diana asks who would be able to do this kind of thing, and Fred didn't think of other people unless the enemies of the masters, even though they came from a calm family. Frederico knew that his masters had many enemies. Julia also knew this, but she couldn't think of anyone at that moment. There didn't come in her mind anyone who could have done this evil. So Frederico says that he has a special way of fixing that curse and that she needs to search for some very rare flowers. He still said that he could help in this, however, he was in his extreme limit. He was quite tired. Julia asks what kind of medicine our protagonist needs, and he decides to explain in details which flowers are these and other medicines that he will need. Meanwhile, the seventh sister, she gets up saying that she should go to the company. There, to her company, the girl only thought of working guys. It is not for nothing that they are Chinese. Frederico says that her body is not ready and that she has to rest, but she says that she received there a message saying that there was someone causing problems in her company and they needed to solve. There in Jiang's company, there were 2 people who were calling for the manager. Those people said that that company owed 2,000 for them. The poor receptionist, she says that she doesn't understand much of this and wanted to call for the staff of the finances. However, the staff didn't care at all, guys. They start to bring some weapons and to break the whole place. They start to hit the televisions and to break everything and taking advantage also to break the floors there of the building. However, the seventh sister she approaches with our protagonist, and Diana, that mysterious guy, asks what she was doing there. So decide to say that it was time to end all that and ask for everyone to advance on top of the girl. As she was very hurt, she would not be able to do anything. However, Frederico approaches to try to solve the situation. He gives a kick in one of the guys, and so he also gives a punch in the other, and quickly he goes passing from one to the other, almost until arriving at the chief. He will realize that their movement was very familiar. So a mysterious guy who is called Davi, he says that Frederico, there, he was very good, only that Davi, he stays getting scared and says to forget about all that. Our protagonist, he doesn't understand very well the situation and asks if the guy is trying to make him a fool. So Davy, he answers that if our protagonist loses, he will double the debt with them. Davy, he had a card up his sleeve and he thought that our protagonist was weak to fall in this, but Frederico asks how they should fight at that moment. Without thinking twice, Davy simply advances on top of our hero Fred. He realizes that Davy's attack was very weak, so decides to return with a punch right in the face of the crazy guy to try to end with everything in a single attack. Davy starts to tremble and even loses consciousness because of this. He says that he will call his master to solve this fight. Fred doesn't understand how that guy had a master being that he was very weak. Davy warns for our protagonist is that his master was quite powerful, so he takes the cell phone and calls asking for help for her. His master was a girl and she answers saying that everything was fine and wanted to help him. Actually, who is the master of this guy there, guys? It was Julia, the sixth sister. She approaches saying that she will take care of that situation. Davy asks his master why she is already there. This left Frederica more confused even, guys. Without understanding why of her being called master by this guy, Julia asks her subordinate why of him being in that place destroying everything. According to her, her students, they're the guys that they should be training in the academy. He tries to make an excuse, but Julia doesn't accept and starts to fight with him. The guy gets a little afraid and says that she is quite strange and doesn't understand why she is so aggressive like that. Today, Julia says that she lost patience with him and tells him to leave soon from there. Davy gets scared and says that originally it was a work that had been paid by a company he was paid to arrive and destroy everything. Julia says that she understood and that it was for him to tell the rest later. So she apologizes for our protagonist and also for Jiang for all the disturbance. Davy gets scared to know that our protagonist was her brother and also of this other girl, realizing that he committed a mistake of attacking these people. And also the company of the seventh sister. He gets scared. Jiang, she says that they need to fix everything, all that was destroyed. So she starts to think of a person who could have paid this guy there, Davy, to arrive until there and destroy the things, and still says that they should have come personally to talk with her. However, Fred, he only wanted to understand why of those people being disciples of Julia. He didn't understand why she had students so weak like that. The girl says that they all are disciples of her, and that for some reason they are weak currently, but she warns that she will deal with them later if something bad happens. At that moment, our protagonist asks if he could visit her academy. However, Julia, she didn't want very much to take them there, guys. But the seventh sister, she also stays insisting to go together. She makes it very clear that she was not very willing to show the academy, but ends up giving in and takes them there. The girl asks for Davy and the staff to take them to the academy to know the place. So the scene changes there. We go to the company that is enemy of the seventh sister. The girl there, she had thrown a glass with everything on the wall. She is Jessica, and she was quite irritated. She was holding a cell phone talking with the staff of another company about how they managed to fail in that attack. This ended up leaving her even more irritated, so she ends up calling some members of the company to verify an alert that had been created. Right now, one of the employees gets up to talk about this, and that from now on, he will manage to proceed with the plan. Jessica asks what kind of plan he would have in mind. They wanted to eliminate Jiang and her whole company. Because of this, they would make the company suffer an attack. She asks if this would not cause a police investigation, but soon her employees approach, saying that she was thinking too much about that matter, and that there would not happen any investigation. Probably these guys, they were already connected with the police. They would only cause some car accidents that would be done by these employees, and from there on, they could proceed to end the Seventh Sisters Company. In a beautiful afternoon, our protagonist and his group, they were going to Julia's academy. Our protagonist had found a little small that place, and David, who is there on the side of our hero, says that it would be good for him to train together with them. However, Julia asks for Davy to stay quiet and not to talk nonsense. Julia continues saying that it was a good place to stay firm and strong, and also to improve the cultivation in our main character. He thinks about managing to stay like this too powerful to equal she. It had been a good time, actually, that he didn't train, so it was good for them to start training, because our protagonist could get rusty. He doesn't even need to train, guys. Every minute, someone appears wanting to fight with him. Julia then invites everyone to do a day of training, so when they enter, the people were there training with all the possible concentration. However, when they see Julia, the staff already starts to look to her and approach giving welcomes. Little by little, they start to do their oath for the girl, and she sighs as if she doesn't like any of it. Diana, who was on the other side, was impressed with everything she was seeing. Someone had given a punch so strong a doll there that almost broke. It would end up giving welcomes for Julia. This called the attention of our main character because the staff there called her master. So he notes a guy who had arrived and asks who was the man with white hair. It says that our protagonist is not worth the talk. The guy is already all arrogant and says that he would not waste his precious time with Federico. This guy's name is Kaike and he was black belt. Julia asks what Kaike was doing there at that moment in her academy. He says that he was training with the younger staff. Actually, he was giving a beating there in Julia's students. Davi enters in the front and explains that the protagonist was very powerful. Only the Kaige doesn't care about this and gives a punch in Davy's face. This Davy appeared in the series there, only to take a beating, guys, for the love of God, before if Davy falls on the floor and starts to call attention of Julia. Soon the smug guy says that it is time to start a fight between them. He was challenging Julia's academy. He still says that if they are with little fear, they could flee at any moment. We already know that rule, right guys? Talker has a bad time. Julia gets a little irritated because this guy was disrespecting her only that actually Kaige, he had a hidden plan. His chief, who is a bald old man, said that if he managed to defeat Julia, he could take this academy for him. This ended up making Kaike get determined and literally want to fight to get the academy. However, Julia was not going to let this so cheap, and says that she will fight against him. But at that moment, someone ends up entering in the front. It was our dear Frederico, who was determined to give a beating in this extra. It is this same that we like to see, guys. Extra asking for little potty. Julia explains that Kaike, he was black belt that could be quite powerful, and maybe our protagonist wouldn't manage to defeat him. You really think, my daughter? You think that our protagonist will lose with this guy there with the face of Earthworm? Fred doesn't care about this kind of thing, and says that there is no problem at all, and that he will solve everything on the base of beating. The crazy guy was very balado, guys, I tell you. He still says that he has the greatest pleasure of hitting these smug and arrogant guys. Obviously, this leaves Kaike irritated, saying that he will not accept to be disrespected in the front of the others. But our protagonist says that he will solve this on the base of beating, and says that he will give a punch in his face. And in this way, they start to beat mouth as if it was two children, one saying that it is better than the other. This makes Kaike very nervous. And he says that he will take all Frederico's women. He looked there for our protagonist surrounded of women, and already imagined that Frederico lived in a harem. Well, that could be right, guys. But these Chinese protagonists there only think about fighting. Frederico got a little irritated with this talk there, guys. And so he prepares for the fight. Diana was watching, saying that Kaike obviously would take a beating a lot. She already knew that our protagonist was stronger. So Frederico obviously agrees with this and accepts the duel. At that moment, Kaike, he advances on top of our protagonist with everything. He jumps to the top and prepares to give a powerful kick. That kick starts to create fireballs for all the sides. The students who were around realized that that was very dangerous. However, Fred, he had supported that attack as if it was nothing. He even smiled in the face of the danger, and Kaike started to swear at our hero. In this way, Fred says that he will end with him. At that instant, it was time for Frederico to return for the attack, and still said that he gave a lot of chance for Kaike. He gives a kick with everything. The blow ends up launching Kaike far away. Not even Fred expected for this, guys. He didn't imagine that the guy there would take a beating so much, and Diana stays in the cheer for him. Kaike, he had hidden a wall, and the other students start to approach, asking if he was well. However, Kaike, he starts to get up and say that our protagonist is not strong enough to defeat him, certainty that this guy, he was dying of fear. Guys, his legs there were even shaky. Actually, he even had broken 2 bones and was only getting up because there were many people watching. If you arrived until this part of the video, consider leaving a comment, so YouTube indicates our video to more people and has more chances. I gave to bring the continuation here for you. He could not lose at that moment, so he starts to get determined, saying that he will defeat our hero Frederico. He was almost holding a laugh, asking if the guy really is so strong like that he talked. Kaike says that he will end this fight in a matter of minutes, and that it was for everyone to stay watching. Meanwhile, Frederico simply will use only one hand. This makes the guy he feel threatened, and because of this he advances for the attack. He gave a jump quite high in direction to Frederico and prepared to give a counter-attack. However, Fred only watched that scene and realized that he would win in one way or another. Actually, Kaike, he was not so strong like that, and our protagonist, he prepared to give a counter-attack. The crazy guy, he already realized that it was going to be very dangerous and ended up feeling our protagonist's hand grab his foot. At that moment, he felt an exorbitant pain and ended up falling to the ground, as if his legs had been deactivated. The students, they were scared, without understanding what was happening. Meanwhile, our protagonist, he approaches, saying that he won that fight. Frederico, he warns that Kaike, he shouldn't appear in that academy anymore. Then Julia takes the opportunity and asks her students to take that guy. Davy approaches and says he will return the punch he gave him, and said he will return it right in the face to ruin the wake. Davy ends up taking a punch in the face, goes flying far away. Someone had approached at that moment, and it was a mysterious guy. Frederico, he was observing that situation, and this bald man, he was Kaike's master. He was a foreigner and didn't speak Mandarin very well, and ended up advancing towards our protagonist with an intense power. Each step he took was like a hole in the world. Frederico realized that this power was very great, and that he could probably stand up to his masters. Julia asks our protagonist to be careful from then on, because something very dangerous was coming in his direction. That old man, he was known as the founder of Taekwondo in Korea. This little old man's name was Takawa, and he is a little impressed since people there knew him. As he approaches, he says that he would destroy all of them who were not his disciples. Kaike, he was completely scared with everything that was happening there. The other students didn't know what to do, but they felt that their strength was getting stronger and stronger. Kaike then speaks the true strength behind him, who was trained with that gentleman, Julia. I didn't understand what people were saying there at that time, but our protagonist tells her to stay safe, as he himself would take care of that situation. Our protagonist says he will open the gate of the Seven Saints, and Julia, her cheeks turned red, already imagining our protagonist all buff. Then he continued because he would fight Takawa. He says that he will end our hero's life. And Frederico told him to make the first move, that he would be waiting. Everyone watches quietly, not understanding that situation. Then Takawa, he advances towards our protagonist. He is completely irritated. The blow flies directly, and Fred, he advances to counterattack Takawa. He felt threatened at that exact moment, but the attack of the two hits, everything creating an intense explosion to Takawa. He takes advantage of this moment to kick our hero with everything, and soon after he tries to give other blows, but Frederico ends up protecting himself. Because of this, he ended up realizing that Takawa, he had a lot of combat experience. People, they were surprised with all this and were even cheering there for Fred, especially Diana. He was even a little lost there. At that time, Julia realized that the protagonist's defense was very good, and because of this, Takawa, he ends up advancing to make an extremely different attack. However, the gentleman realized that our hero, he was also strong. It wouldn't be so easy, and he starts to defend the attacks. The blows were quite varied, and our hero was there defending from all of them. Takawa, he noticed an opening, but our hero, he had a plan and was smiling because of that. The situation ended up scaring Takawa, who didn't understand very well what was happening. Realizing that the guy had hesitated, Fred advanced towards that crazy guy. He used one of his attacks that was defended with the kick. The gentleman realized that it was not a good thing, and because of that, our protagonist advanced running towards Takawa. He used one of his attacks that was defended with the kick. The gentleman, he realized that it was not very good, and therefore our hero, he advanced again, giving the old man an elbow. Taking advantage of this opening, Takawa attacks again, and the old man felt the attack with everything saying that it was over. And in this way, he flew with everything into the wall. That ended up scaring Kaike, who didn't understand how that had been done, but our hero, he was strong enough to defeat anyone who got in his way. People were cheering there for our hero, and the students said that that gentleman wasn't anything special, and that he ended up losing to a child. The other students, the gentleman Takawa, ended up getting lost there, and without knowing what they should do. Because of that, Kaike, he also stayed there, kinda lost, and soon after he got angry. He starts to emanate a red aura, and the guy swore that he could handle fighting against our hero. He shouted for Fred, because at that moment he didn't understand very well what was happening. Frederico, he was confused, because that fight was already over, and yet the guy was still there wanting to fight. However, the gentleman fallen on the floor starts to smile. He takes out of his clothes 2 flasks and ends up drinking that magical liquid. Kaike understood very well what his master was doing. However, our protagonist wasn't understanding anything. The gentleman then says that that was a secret technique of medicine? His body starts to get incredibly strong, his clothes even tear. The old man's students there have never seen him like that. Kaike also seems that he had never seen it, but he knew what it was about. Takawa, he didn't care about the consequences, and ends up advancing towards Kaike, giving him a punch with everything in his face. He observes our hero directly, ready to end that fight. Julia, she realized the gravity of that situation, and says that she will help Frederico. The two stand side by side against this gentleman Takawa, and our protagonist makes a challenge that whoever falls first will have to pay for food for the other. Master Takawa, he advances towards Frederico in the middle of this confusion, and our hero, he managed to dodge that attack. Because of this, the gentleman, he prepares another blow. Julia says that she will advance first, and then our protagonist could go together to complete the attack. However, our hero, he didn't care. He advances first. Without mercy or pity, then the two at the same time advance and kick that gentleman, who ends up managing to defend himself. However, at that exact moment, the gentleman was preparing to attack Julia with everything, and when he does that, our girl, she manages to dodge perfectly in the air. She looks at our protagonist, and he already knew what he should do. At that moment, he had distracted the gentleman so that Julia could give a blow to his back, and taking advantage of that attack, Frederico, he also advances to give another one. They had weakened that gentleman a little, who even ends up getting irritated, saying that he will end the life of the two. Because of that, Fred advances towards with Julia. He prepares to kick, and the girl also loads an upcoming blow. The two end up managing to hit everything in the old man. He keeps complaining, saying that he was feeling a lot of pain, and this even makes him fall to his knees on the ground, and after a while he falls with his head forward. Fred, he realized that it wasn't that difficult, and Davy approaches saying that they are like incredible people. He holds our protagonist's shoulder, saying that the boy he fought very well, and asks if he has any secret to be so good at martial arts. Then he asks if the people who were there would like to know about this. All the students were enthusiastic to understand how Frederico's power worked. Our protagonist, he was a very talented guy, but ends up saying that he will teach them this path of martial arts. They say that training was the best, that it should start as soon as possible. Then the scene changes to a little later at night. There, the people prepared for an entire banquet. Fred, he was really liking that. And the seventh sister, she tells them to ignore Fred, who was eating too much and causing a certain shame there in the people. But that was normal guys. Protagonists always ate a lot. Soon the seventh sister starts to feel a little sick. She says that she wasn't feeling that bad, but that she will lie down to rest. Fred said he will help her if anything happens. Because of this, after a while, our hero goes away. He says that he'll prepare the medicine when he returns next time, and his sister says that she'll be very happy if he returns with the cure. And the seventh sister takes the opportunity to tell the driver that if anything happens to her dear little brother, Julia will not forgive Davy. He said he will take very good care of our protagonist, and then goes away with our hero. Julia says that it's been 2 years since she saw our protagonist for the last time, and Diana was there taking care of the seventh sister, inside the car. The protagonist says that he'll take very good care of her, but that they need to run directly to a place where he could better treat his sister Davy. He says not to worry because there weren't many cars on the street. At that time of night, the scene changes to another place, where there's a mysterious guy. He had a very mafia face, and it was a guy who was following our hero, ready to hit him in the car. Then he steps on the accelerator, goes with everything, and even ends up giving a malicious smile. In the last moment, that man ended up causing a car crash, and he says that he would end all that situation now. With the seventh sister, the car crash was very intense, and caused a small explosion in our hero's car. After a while, someone ended up getting out of the black car, and ended up taking the cell phone to take the photos that were necessary to prove the accident. However, when he took the cell phone and opened his camera, he realized that there was no one there in the front seat, other than the driver. He took the photo there of the seventh sister, along with Diana, and said that he ended her life. However, someone appeared behind him, which left the guy there a little scared. It was Frederico who was there asking what he was doing. The boy gives a warning: if Frederico approaches, he will end our hero's life, but obviously this guy doesn't have the power for that. And our hero was already preparing 2 needles. He advanced towards with an attack. Those 2 needles hit right in the boy's chest, who didn't understand very well what was happening. He felt a very great pain and couldn't describe it. And those needles caused a laughing fit. He said that this boy was going to suffer a lot. However, the boy continued laughing and said that was a gigantic torture. Then Frederico, he already took out the 2 needles, because he had already realized who had sent him to do that. He asked the boy what he intended to do at that moment. He hands the cell phone to our hero, saying that there were some recordings of the seventh sister. He believed that the seventh sister had lost her life, but someone ends up taking the cell phone from that guy. It was Davy, and he was completely injured. He ends up remembering that boy's face, and, to the surprise of that crazy guy, the seventh sister ends up coming out alive from inside. She was irritated and said that he shouldn't do that kind of thing. He turns his back asking if she was okay at that moment, and all this was thanks to Frederico. In a short period of time, he ended up using his powers to save everyone, and the boy asked for his cell phone again. He does this because he couldn't leave those evidences, but someone ends up taking a photo of him, and it was Frederico who was using facial recognition mode and just recorded that whole scene. The boy says that he will fight with Frederico, but Davy says that he won't let this happen because no one can hit his boss. And for the first time in this work, Davy managed to be useful for something and gives a big punch in the crazy guy. He was excited because he managed to finish someone, and soon after that they went to the seventh sister's mansion. Inside, she decides to finish the treatment with Fred. She says that she was perfectly fine at that moment in which she had already improved Fred. In turn, he's happy with such news, and soon after the seventh sister, she says that he could continue at will. Fred says that he will do something that he has never done before, which is probably something very different. She asks what kind of thing he is talking about, and he says that she also has a curse, but that he'll be able to fix all that. You're already seeing it, right, guys? The masters trained our hero to be removing the curse from his sisters. That ends up leaving the seventh sister confused, and she doesn't understand very well what she should do at that moment. In another place, a man was there preparing to do something a very beautiful woman ends up handing him some wine, and the man takes advantage to give a little bite on the chicken that was there in his other hand. However, he was completely lost and felt something horrible in his body. He then threw everything to all sides and realized that someone had touched his curse. Someone who was probably strong enough to understand all that. And the image of the sixth sister started to pass in the guy's head, thinking that it had something to do with her. Soon he realized that someone was there doing something horrible. As he couldn't let someone touch his curse, he ended up preparing to make an attack. He was too excited to do that kind of thing. Meanwhile, Diana ended up entering the room where our protagonist was. He asks what happened, and she wanted to know if she would need her help to do the treatment on the seventh sister. The big boy says that obviously yes, but only after 1 hour. Then he goes there to the outside. Frederico kept thinking about what kind of thing could be happening inside, and the image of the two will end up appearing in his mind. Nothing shameless, he even got excited at that time. He was even trying to stay a little calmer and not think about those nonsense. At that moment, he sits on the sofa to watch the news and calm down a little. However, he ends up reading about a criminal gang that was roaming the city. He keeps watching the news and then tries to read something. At that moment, he smells a little different and a black smoke appears dominating the whole place, as if something was burning. Soon he realizes that there was fire coming out to all sides, and realizing this fire, Fred prepares to do what he knows how to do best, which is to save people. After that, he starts to throw water to all sides, trying to put out the fire, and he starts to do this even with a certain desperation, because he realized that the lives of many people would be at risk. However, the fire was very strong, it didn't stop in any way. He tries to open the door, but he also couldn't. On the outside, someone had sealed that place, and it was one of the participants who was with the purpose of ending the life of the seventh sister. The guy was smoking. Soon after setting fire in the building, he sighs deeply and says that it was time to go away, because the mission was already accomplished. Another companion of this guy keeps saying that they should watch to see the outcome there of the fire. However, the red-haired man, he says that this was not necessary, because in fact the mission was already finished. Another guy appears and said that it's time to go away, because the place it would be full of people. And now that they had already set fire there in the building, they keep saying that they will go away so they wouldn't be arrested. Our hero was inside trying to open the door in all possible ways, but he couldn't, and that wasn't very good. But he wasn't succeeding, and the smoke was spreading that could be dangerous as the entire place. He was being taken by the flames. Frederico, he should do something urgent, no matter what happened. Then he ends up breaking down the door with everything and asks if the seventh sister was okay. However, she and Diana were preparing to do that thing that, because of this, Diana ends up getting embarrassed. However, Fred, he looks to the side and decides to explain that the house was on fire. The two don't understand very well, right? How come on fire out of nowhere? Then they run away, and the seventh is a question, how the house was like. That Frederico thinks that the cables must have been dropped or someone set fire. Simple as that. Perceiving the situation, Fred tries to find out who would be the person who was behind all this, but without having much time to be acting as a detective, and he ends up using his powers to get out of there as quickly as possible. In the middle of all this, the cables start to catch fire even more, so he ends up kicking the door hard. It was time to go away from that place, and they leave the mansion running with all their strength. Our protagonist looks back and returns to see if there was anyone else there nearby. He had breathed a lot of smoke, and was tired of all this. Diana, she starts calling the firefighters, and the seventh sister, she was tired because she was still sick. Jiang said that it was not necessary to call the fire department and could only let the house catch fire. Diana doesn't understand the reason for this behavior of her, then asks what had happened. Jiang, she doesn't answer. She only says that they will continue to the monitoring room to try to see who had done this. Looking at the cameras, they managed to identify 3 villains who had done this arson. She already figured out right away who was involved in all this. Fred asks, who are these crazy guys who had reached this point of setting fire in a house? The seventh sister. She explains that she has a feud with a company and continues saying that Jessica from the other company was not a very good person and that they should talk now with the public relations department. And she still completes saying that she must end with this feud right now. Time goes by at that moment, and so we go inside the rival company. There was that Jessica commanding her employees to finish the mission that was given to them. The red-haired boy, he had taken a slap in the face, and he tells Jessica that he was trying to finish the mission as much as possible. These people there were shameless, and she decides to warn that this kind of thing can't happen without her permission, then ends up stepping on his face. She still asks what they were planning to do now. A white-haired man called Arthur prepares to help this Jessica, but that woman, she was completely irritated and asks him to say quickly what he wants. He decides to explain that the author there of the arson, in fact, this guy there who is under her foot, and continues saying that this was a great plan, because it will hinder the company of Jiang. She reflects a little and thinks that this makes sense and ends up thanking them. Arthur says that this could be a very relevant topic in public relations, and soon Jessica ends up saying that that red-haired boy had to suffer a little more. However, he was being very helpful in fulfilling the missions in the last days and ends up asking if he knows perfectly what he should do. The guy, he understood very well this type of wording. And soon Jessica approaches Arthur and says that she has some very interesting ideas, and continues saying that they should go together to the back room to do certain little things, if you know what I mean. She holds Arthur's tie and says that he has a kind of hard work to do that night, and the guy says that he will leave her very satisfied. The guy there with the red hair, he just keeps watching all that, and the door closed right in his face. Obviously, he was irritated, because Arthur was using that guy there simply to use Jessica, the seventh sister. She was there on the next day, completely perfect and wonderful. She looks back asking how she was. Diana obviously says that she was very beautiful, then she puts on the glasses, and asks if she also looked beautiful with glasses, this woman, and she looks beautiful in any way, guys. And Diana says that she is very beautiful. And Diana never expected that she would kiss the owner of such a famous and beautiful company even more. And Jiang, she says that she has to stop with this nonsense, and focus on getting rid of these enemies. They should in fact find out who is behind all those evils. Then she arrives in the room and warns our hero that it was time to go away. Frederico, who is reading some things, he says that he was preparing for that exact moment, and she asks what he was reading. And he says that it was a medicine book that he had won from the masters, and that he was learning a little more advanced techniques. At that moment, he thinks right away about Alice, and realizes that he had to finish doing something with her. Then Jae-young says that they have to finish all that as quickly as possible, which is this mission of finding out who is doing these evils. However, on the other side of the city, Jessica was looking at her cell phone completely lost. She was seeing the news, and she was getting more and more irritated, because the news there of Jung's house having caught fire had spread, and everyone was knowing about this. Arthur warns that she wouldn't need to worry because this was part of the plan. She says that it was probably something very interesting, this plan of Arthur, and he answers that they could calm down, because everything was under control. In fact, Arthur says that there is only one last step that they had to follow. The red-haired boy called Alan. He enters the room running. Arthur, he had the plan to deliver him to the police as if he had hired the thief, the criminal. And Jessica says that it was a great false proof to use at that moment. Because of this, their cell phones start to ring. Soon she takes the cell phone to answer and talk to the person on the other side of the line. She answers and asks who was speaking, and it was someone from the security guards who was speaking to bring some people up there on the building. She says that there is no problem and can send them up. And so she turns off the cell phone completely happy, because it was time for her little show to start Jung together with her brother. There, our hero. They had entered that building, prepared to find out everything. Soon an officer she appears saying that the seventh sister and Frederico were there. Jessica, obviously, she accepted their entry since they were prepared there to make that plan. Because of this, Yang says that she went to that place on her own. The security guards were all around them, prepared for what had to happen. They were already kind of aware that our protagonist was buff, so they were kind of scared. Meanwhile, several reporters were in front of Jessica's desk asking several things about what had happened. The girl says that she caught the bandit who was behind having burned Jiang's house. Jiang appears at that moment and says to have recordings of the members of Jessica's company, and that it was she who ordered them to do this. However, Jessica, she says that those recordings were not necessary, because she already caught the person who was behind all this. The seventh sister didn't quite understand what the blonde meant. Meanwhile, the reporters were very excited, as this news would shake the entire city. Jessica then asked to enter, and the door opened slowly. Arthur appears together with Alan, who was tied up at that moment. Someone asked them to stop. Then Arthur explains that it was orchestrated by a small group and that boy called Alan. He was behind all this, and that it was also a plan of the Seventh Sister's company for you to understand. Guys, they don't keep calling her Seventh Sister, no. They keep calling her Jiang even. But it's just for you to understand. Obviously, Jiang got irritated because she wasn't part of this, and was there without understanding anything. All the people start to get surprised with what had happened to Jessica. She takes a compliment of her recordings, saying that she had proof of all that. And then she points all the data of Alan saying that that was necessary. Jiang wasn't understanding what had happened and asked how it was possible for her to have gotten that information. Frederico soon realized that that was nothing more than a trap, and they were creating false proofs. And soon after that, a police officer enters the place and realizes that all the documentation was true. She turns to the seventh sister asking what had happened. She demands that she explain everything that was happening and if in fact this Alan was an employee of Jiang. The seventh sister warns that this is a lie and that she doesn't even know this boy. And soon Jessica asks if she will avoid all that evidence that was in front of them in the seventh sister. She thinks very well what she should do at that moment, because anything that she said she could end up getting complicated. And then Frederico, realizing that something was wrong, he already gets close to that boy, of which Jessica had great evidences. She asks Jiang if she has something to say, and that obviously all that would be resolved in court. Everyone there was turning against Jiang, but Frederico, he says that he has something to say. She asks, what is this boy going to do? And our protagonist asks if he could ask some questions to this Alan in public in front of the cameras. Arthur, who is right behind, he says that everything is okay. Then Jessica takes advantage, and says that he could do it, because they wouldn't take anything from him. Fred approaches Alan. He was realizing that this guy was completely altered. Because of this, our protagonist knew more or less what was happening. Then he touches the boy's shoulder and decides to ask if he really is an employee of the seventh sister, and if someone was ordering him to answer these questions. He simply answers that he is an employee of the seventh sister. Then Fred starts to use his powers and asks if he could think a little more about these questions. The boy was with his conscience heavy, and then he starts to recover little by little his own sanity. And soon Arthur says that there is something strange happening. Alan, he starts to feel an intense pain at that exact moment, and all the people who were with the cameras start to record as fast as possible. That was live being reported on all televisions. Then Alan, he says that he is not an employee of the seventh sister, and that all this was commanded by Jessica Arthur. He doesn't understand how that could have happened, and the people who were with the cameras start to take several photos and to record all that situation. He starts talking that Jessica ordered him to set fire on Jiang's house and also to burn all the files. However, the girl says that all that was a lie and that she couldn't do that kind of thing. The officer asks Jessica what had happened at that moment, and the woman tries to downplay all that, talking that it was a lie and that everything was being invented. However, Alan refutes, saying that that in fact was all plan of her and Arthur. Then the officer starts to think about what she should do at that moment. And Alan, he wasn't understanding what he had done wrong, since he was only telling the truth. Jessica starts to get extremely nervous, and Frederico asks if Alan has any evidence of the things that he said. Then Alan says that everything was inside his pocket, and our protagonist then cuts the ropes that were holding Alan's wrist. The boy thanks our hero and continues talking that all this was prepared by Jessica and that he could prove with just one thing. Then he takes out his cell phone with an audio that was recorded on the night that he was beaten. In that audio, It said that Jessica had agreed in having burned the Seven Sisters' house, that all that would have been planned. Both Jessica and Arthur started to tremble on their bases. And Alan? He continues playing the audio, talking that everyone should listen to that, because it was the only truth that he had in his hands. Fred ends up smiling and asks if the people have anything to say. Obviously that Jessica and Arthur start to deny all this, saying that that audio was fake. Then he asks the people to start observing better in her actions. The cameras start to realize everything that was happening, and soon Jessica ends up burning herself, asking how that boy could have betrayed her. He said that in fact he always dreamed of working for her, however this betrayal that she did with him left him very upset. The officer ends up placing the handcuffs on that girl's hand, and tells everyone to step away, and that she would take Jessica to the custody. Everything was being finished, and the reporters start asking to Jessica if she could explain herself. Arthur, who is there trembling with fear, he says that everything had ended at that exact moment, and the people already start to leave the room. And Alan? He starts to think better about his life. Time passes, and Jiang, together with Frederico, end up leaving that place. She ends up thanking a little for everything that he did. He said that it wasn't anything special, and that he only used the knowledge that he already had. Then Jiang warns that a time of peace will come for her company, and that our protagonist, if he wanted, could help her with some things. She ends up asking if he could also help the sixth sister with certain things, mainly with her curse. Our protagonist talks that he was thinking there and this curse of her, and that he had even asked something to his masters, related to curses of this type. The master at the time had said something mysterious. She asked Fred what the master was wanting to say. When he spoke these things, they're kind of strange. He talks about the snakes that are used for curses, and one didn't appear. We ask if it was a snake with wings on its back, and if that really existed. At first, our protagonist, he doesn't know very well if this kind of thing exists, but he believes in his master. Then he talks that he will prepare some things and will go to the mountain to see if he finds the snake. Taking advantage of this fact, they say that they will go to the biggest shopping mall of the city, because it was necessary to buy some things there. Fred leaves the car running, talking that he'll prepare the things. Then he visits the clothes store, then the accessories store, and finally the jewelry store, and he simply walks here and there with his hands in his pocket. But at that moment, his cell phone starts to vibrate. He decides to take it and check the messages. It was a message from Alice. It had been a long time since they had seen each other, and while our hero there he was using the cell phone, something ends up happening. A woman in front of him looks at Frederico and says that he was taking photos of her. Fred gets confused, because he wasn't doing any of that, and the woman asks him to stop and delete those photos. Fred, he even tries to explain himself, and that in fact he was only answering a message. Soon she ends up approaching, very irritated, until a fat gentleman he approaches asking what was happening. The woman, she explains all the situation about our protagonist was taking photos secretly, and the guy simply throws the glasses of drink that he was with, who approaches our hero completely irritated, asking why he had done this. The people around get completely irritated with the situation. And our protagonist? He even tries to explain himself and says that in fact he wasn't taking any photo, he was only answering a message. The man prepares to give a punch in our hero with everything, but at that moment he ends up dodging until he looks back, holding the arm of that gentleman. The guy keeps screaming, talking that it was hurting a lot. And our protagonist already talks that the guy there was the one who looked for a fight, then he already goes away even from these crazy people. And still tries to explain that everything was nothing more than a misunderstanding. The guy continues irritated, asking how that could have happened. However, someone appears asking what was happening there at that exact moment. The people look to the sides asking who would be that person, and it was the seventh sister who was there to protect our hero. The people get enchanted with her beauty. And Frederico gives a hello to the girl again. She holds Fred's arm and simply asks what he was doing there. Because of this, everyone starts to get embarrassed knowing that our protagonist was accompanied by such a beautiful girl like that. She pulls our hero away at that moment, talking that they will go shopping. And the other one was getting even more irritated. The man who was accompanying this woman gives a slap on her with everything since he thought that she was lying. And meanwhile, Frederico talks that she was holding him with too much strength. She asks if he doesn't like this sensation, and she explains that everyone was envious of him. That's why he was calling so much attention while they walked. And because of this, our big boy, he gets all excited. After that, they go away, and our protagonist leaves the car. He gives a goodbye to her, talking to the girl to take care. And Jiang says that everything was okay, while Diana also gives a goodbye to him, and after saying goodbye, the car goes away. Then he starts to walk, going away to his house. But a mysterious shadow starts to appear behind our protagonist. He tries to give a direct attack that ends up leaving Frederico confused. He already looks back, feeling that he will be attacked. If you're enjoying this story and want to see more, drop a comment saying part 4 and I'll bring more soon. That's it for today, folks. See you next time.